very warm welcome to all our participants and guests tuned in to the second day of the Skills Development Summit 2020. Yesterday, we had fruitful conversations, we had challenging conversations, thought provoking, and insights from participants and panelists, as well as keynote speakers, that really challenged our thoughts about skills development. Let me remind you to continue to hashtag on skills 2020. Add your comments, give us your feedback, and we're truly, truly grateful to have you online with us, joining us on this virtual platform. Just a couple of housekeeping. I just want to remind you that we have a virtual expo. Please do visit it. You have links on your screens and so forth. As you visit our virtual expo, you have a chance of winning whopping rewards. There's a competition. We'll be running a raffle later, and we look forward to awarding 2 people this afternoon with gifts and prizes from our expo. So make sure that as you take a tea break, as you sanitize, as you put on your mask, and as you make sure that you make your coffee, make sure you visit all our virtual expo participants and engage with them. That's the most important thing. Don't just look and click. Engage, ask questions, and make sure that you get feedback so that you can walk out with a prize this afternoon. One of the key lessons that we learned yesterday is greatness is not about being strong, but it's about knowing when to use your strength, understanding your skill, and also ensuring that you acquire the skill that you would like, not only just to get a job, but for a particular purpose, for a particular intent. That is where you can utilize your strength. So, with that, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to welcome all of you to the Skills Development Summit 2020. We're not going to waste any more time, we're not going to engage any more further, but I wish to welcome our first keynote address opening our day 2 would be Miss Melody Kaba, who is the Chief Creative Officer of My Future Work. Melody, we look forward to hearing more of your insights. Over to you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, whilst we still getting hold of Melody Kaba, I just want to give perhaps a synopsis from yesterday's keynote addresses. If you didn't join us yesterday, this is what you missed out. We had guests such as Dr. Onkgopotse JJ Tabane, who spoke so much about the importance of skill development. How do we master technical skills moving forward? How do we change our curriculum? Because it has not been changed for almost 3 decades. So how do we change our curriculum to make sure that it is in line with the skills that are needed, particularly in this era, and the skills that are needed, particularly in our economy? Then we moved on to say, we've got legislation and policies in government that are not 100% fruitful in their implementation and their execution. So, for example, when we come to the triple BEE, and the BEE scorecard as well, where it's all about making sure that we have Black ownership, management, and procurement, but we can have those 3 tenets, but they're not effective if we do not drive training when it comes to corporate governance and also the King Code. So a lot of companies collapse because we fail to integrate policies from bottom up when it comes to skills. So we had the doc there telling us about the importance of inculcating a skills revolution. How do we reinvent the skills that are needed for this current developmental agenda? We then also moved on to Mr. Schofield, who gave us such a beautiful illusion and alliteration about using the right quality material to ensure the structure does not collapse. So what is this right quality material? It's the skills that are needed for this generation, and skills that are needed to continue to build and continue in our line of innovation. So Mr. Schofield there told us about having experience within context of skills development. And one of the points that I believe deserved to be accentuated was that it's all well and good to have, kids that are literate. It's all well and good to teach them how to read, But if we don't help them structure the material and the content that needs to be read, then it's definitely futile. So if we don't understand what we are reading, but we know how to read, then there's no way that we can move forward. So that was quite profound, what was shared there. No point in teaching them what to read without observing the context. So that was Mr. Schofield there, that gave us a dichotomy between primary socialization and secondary socialization, saying to us that, ladies and gentlemen, a skill is not found in the classroom. A skill starts from the household. And this is what we call primary socialization. Excuse me, I won't be moving my hands too much. So that's what we call primary socialization, where you develop a child from the time they are home and from the time they are toddlers, moving into your secondary socialization, where they then become teenagers into their adulthood. That was Mr. Schofield giving us quite a great iteration there. Then we had Dr. Tsepo as well telling us about skills development, focusing on mental capacity. So those are some of the things that we went through to say, skills, it shouldn't be acquired for the sake of getting a job, but it should be acquired because it's something that we are passionate about and it's something that we need to do. And throughout the day, ladies and gentlemen, I will be serving you with nuggets from our first day of the Skills Development Summit. Miss Melody Kaba is ready for us, and I'd like to then hand it over to her. Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Melody Kaba, and I'm from an organization called My Future Work. And we are a learning and development agency that specializes in blended learning solutions and digital solutions as well. And today I'm going to be speaking to you about the digital economy, mobilizing the workforce. And I'd like to kick off this conversation really with something that Professor Rasool said, and you might be familiar with him. He is an advisor to the Department of Higher Education and Training. And he said, we are constrained in the fight against COVID-19 by the same challenges we are seeking to address, being poverty, inequality, and unemployment, right? Unemployment in the youth was on the rise even before the COVID-19 crisis. We don't know what the figures will be following this crisis. In general, the system is unsound. We are afraid to make tough decisions. We need to make build both decisions. Incremental changes lead to incremental results. So now looking at where are we supposed to be going, right? And I know that you just said, we need to learn really for the enjoyment of learning, and I very much agree with that. But at the moment, as a country, we are, sitting with the crisis, and learning is one of those solutions, right, that can help us with really having an impact in the economy. This is part of the National Skills Development Plan, which their mission is to improve access to occupations in high demand and priority skills, aligning to supporting economic growth, employment creation, and social development, whilst also seeking to address systematic considerations. So learning now needs to be able to lead us to a skilled workforce, increase employment, and have economic impact, right? And our strategy for learning needs to look at that. How do we go from learning to then having a positive economic impact? And digital is one of those factors, right? We've entered the fourth industrial revolution. COVID-19 has fast-tracked digital transformation in ways that, we've never even thought was going to happen. And now we are in a position where digital is here, we are using these solutions and just looking at the value, right, that can be unlocked by digital technologies. And now we're looking at just government services only, right? In a report that was released by PricewaterhouseCoopers last year, they said government services is likely to create the highest value for society through its impact on economic activity, productivity, and service delivery, adding $2 trillion worth of value. And this, is driven by the adoption of technologies such as IoT, connected devices, AI, and platforms. So many organizations are expecting to increase their use of AI, robotics, all these different technologies, but they're sitting with the challenge. And this now comes from a recent report that was released by Deloitte, where organizations are saying 69%, right, regard their current talent pools as insufficiently equipped to execute digital strategies. This is a huge challenge, right? And also 57% of those organizations, L&D curricula does not support their digital strategy. So this is a problem, because how do we then rip off the rewards of the digital economy if we don't have the skills that are necessary for us to be able to do that? There are three drivers of digital technology and ways of work in South Africa. And what's driving that within organizations is that organizations want to create unique customer experiences. They're looking at delivering innovative products and services. And they're also looking to reduce costs. So that's what's driving digital technology within organizations. And what does that look like now in terms of how does it affect work and how does it affect skills? So I've got different case studies that I want to show you on how jobs are evolving in South Africa. So let's look at the financial services sector for starters, right? So rapid digital adoption, right, is the result of the increased number of connected devices. Let me just move this quickly. So you've got the rapid digital adoption, and then you've got customer preferences and expectations that are changing. And because of that, right, you've got technologies like your big data analytics and artificial intelligence that are changing the manner in which decisions are made and products are developed and processes are designed. And what does that mean for work now? Roles like your tellers, accountants, auditors are decreasing, your statistic clerks. And we saw this in 2019 with the retrenchments that are happening, with the banks. And the roles that have increased, driven by digital technologies, are your likes of cybersecurity expert, your cloud banking, your investor protection specialist, etc. The second sector I want us to look at is, So I want us to look at the mining sector next. And what's happening in the mining sector is that falling commodity prices and the depletion of easier to reach minerals are putting pressure on the profitability of mining operations. Mining in South Africa is mostly deep and therefore risky and expensive. So how are people using technology now to respond, to these challenges? For starters, you're looking at drone applications. How does this solve a problem? When mining is deep and dangerous, it means that you don't necessarily have to have humans go all the way down there to go and mine, but you can use technologies, for example, using robotics, looking at using a drone to use that as a camera to go and assess out the space. And so technology is also then become a huge part in the mining industry and what's driving the changes. How is that affecting jobs and the skills that we need to acquire? Decreasing roles, you're looking at your procurement clerks, your crane hosts and winch operators, etc. And increasing roles, again, are more in the digital, right? We are looking at specialists in remining waste dumps, underground drone operator, your data analyst, your application developer, and etc. And the final one that I want us to look at is the education sector in South Africa. It's also driven by, a number of factors. Digitization, number one, there's an increase in demand in learning platforms, where COVID-19 has been a strong catalyst in, increasing this demand. And you're also looking at, globalization. And I know that with COVID-19, there's also, deglobalization has also been a factor. But I think that we are experiencing a different kind of globalization where it doesn't necessarily involve where people have to move to another country, but we have become a lot more connected, where people want to be able to work, in other countries, and we are going to see more and more of that happening. Another driving factor with the education sector is aging and older workers that are facing increasing labor market insecurity, and the pressure will mount for access to higher quality reskilling and upskilling opportunities. So what is that, in terms of technology? So improved user interfaces and algorithms building upon big data, they have a significant impact on education and how, we are now teaching. And the roles in terms of jobs that are decreasing. Admin roles, teachers who are just showing content, education that is not customized. And increasing roles, we are looking at your learning progress analysts, curated knowledge specialists, learning designer, instructional designers. And for us as a learning and development agency, there's a lot of this that we are already practicing when it comes to our clients. And so our attitude in terms of just dealing with the learning solutions and the skilling solutions that we suggest and what we provide in organizations have to change, right? One of the things that, I know that people find scary is when we speak about the fact that everyone must code, right? It's overwhelming. And would it be great for everybody to code? That would be wonderful. I mean, I myself cannot code. I love to learn how to code. I don't necessarily have the time, right, to do that. But that attitude needs to change, right? And it's not so much about taking everyone and turning everyone into an engineer, but it's about acquiring the necessary digital skills. And the best way is for us to start incorporating digital skills into our everyday work, right? And into our current careers. Because that is a lot more palatable and easier to consume than saying, everyone must learn to code and we need so many engineers, which of course we do, right? I'm not disputing that we need that. But as a worker that's currently, you already have a career, you've been working for so many years, and the changes that need to happen should not overwhelm people, but we need to find strategies to do this in ways that will be easier for people to adopt. And more than anything, we need to lower the barrier. And there's different ways in which we can lower this barrier, right? And it's in our upskilling solutions that we provide. And the first one that I want us to look at is embedded and embodied learning, right? Where the movement of information into the real world from restricted physical settings like buildings. And there's different ways then in which we can move this information. The second one is content commons, where open digital markets, text simulations, video, audio recordings, photographs, and learning tools. And this is one of the ways in which we can use for upskilling. Next one being superstructured work, where micro contributions from large networks of people utilizing social tools and technologies to contribute to a whole and resource assembly in the cloud. And this is not necessarily structured in the sense that it's a book and the learning has to come from one person, but I guess it's a question of everyone gets to contribute, right, to this pool of knowledge that we have. And the next one being a global learning arbitrage, where we're making use of tutors, mentors, and institutions that are unaccompanied by legacy systems. Next one being new foundations, where a new set of foundation players, organizations, and platform functioning as modern day utilities. So here we are looking at like your open universities, like your Coursera's, your edX's, your Udemy's. I mean, there's all these international ones, but where is our South African one? Where is our South African one that has content that is relevant, to our people, teaching in ways that speak to our people and using methods that are relevant to our people? So we have to look at that as well as an upskilling option. And final one being human software symbiosis, right, where we start to use evidence-based learning analysis for successful learning, so that then we can assess, we can take data, right, from the individual person's learning and be able to assess that journey and say, how are you learning? How is this working? How do we adopt that? And how do we replicate that to help more people learn? So this speaks to more about using AI and using data. Part of the reason why it's important for us to look at different ways of upskilling and lowering the barrier is digital transformation in Africa is driven by mobile device connection. And at the moment, when you look at our digital learning solutions, they are mostly focused on you must have a computer or you must have a laptop, but that's not how digital is really in South Africa currently. I mean, we have a population of 58 million people, and we have 103 million mobile connections, right? And the number of internet users that we've got amongst, the 58 million, you've got about 36 million people. And that's all those internet users are accessing not all, most of them are accessing the internet using the mobile devices. And this is what, the stats look like for mobile devices, where you've got the total number of mobile users, internet users at 34.93 million in South Africa. And mobile internet users as percentage of internet users is 96%, which is, it's a lot. It's the huge number. And then the share of all internet users accessing via smartphones is 95%. And the share of all internet users accessing via feature phones, you're looking at 4.3%. And the daily time spent by a South African using internet and a mobile device is 4 hours a day. That's a big number. I mean, if you think about the fact that mostly we are awake for about 16 hours a day, And to think that about 4 hours of, a day of that 16 hours, we spend that on our mobile devices. Shouldn't our learning then evolve, right, to speak to our most organic way of accessing the internet? What we generally strive for, really, as an organization, as a learning and development organization, is looking at who is the learner and what is the easiest way to access learning, right? And of course, looking at what the barriers and the challenges that they are facing. And then you look at what is then the learning solution, again, still looking at the barriers and dealing with those barriers. And the best way that we find is that when you create a learning solution that and have compassion for the learner really in the process, for that. And so our learning and our ways of upskilling need to be a lot more organic to our landscape, right, in Africa and in South Africa. Yes, we have a challenge with infrastructure, and those challenges are there and those challenges are real. But more than anything else, people are accessing the internet, people are accessing devices, but we are not really focusing at the moment our learning and meeting them at the place where they are, which is mobile. And that's how I'd like to close the session today. Thank you so much.
Well then, ladies and gentlemen, that was Miss Melody Kaba speaking to us about customizing education by incorporating digital skills. That's a very, very strategic input that was offered along that topic. And I think one thing that it reminded me of, Ms. Kaba, is that how do we strive for progress in our industries and not perfection? Once again, how do we strive for progress and not perfection? So creating a student symbiosis using digital platforms. So it's not about careers or industries that are becoming extinct, but it's about how do we revolutionize them to become better. So thank you very much for those insights. And once again, you reminded me that it's not the rate of change that is important, but it's the direction of change that we take that is important. So this is all about cosmic disclosure that oftentimes science would use. But I mean, in light of that, we know that in the United States alone, 6 million SMMEs closed down due to the COVID pandemic. And we know in South Africa, we're looking at about 3.5 or so. So skills development is critical, and we need to continue to have conversations about this evolution. And leading us into that would be Mr. John Foster Pedley, who is the Dean and Director of Henley Business School Africa. Mr. Pedley, I wish to remind you that you owe me a phone call from about a year ago. So I'm still waiting for your call and for you to return my missed call. So let's talk about that offline after your speech. But without further ado, sir, I wish to welcome you.
Fine, thank you. I've got that. So apologies for that. It's a little strange environment, this screen with nobody talking to you. So I'm really pleased to speak to you. I'm going to talk today about mindfulness, strangely enough. It's been a weird world we live in. I think that since COVID's hit us, I don't know about you, but it's as if our minds have gone into overdrive. And I've heard this from so many different people, that the worry, the anxiety, the change, it's just that this treadmill that sits in our head has gone into a sort of state of a hyperdrive, and it's chatting. Our internal narratives are going on. We're chasing after facts. We're trying to find the truth. We're worried what to do. And the pressures of lockdown, etc., mean that we're not able to de-stress and talk to other people in quite the same way as we used to. So I'd like to talk a little bit about something that's helped me and helps a lot of people in their lives to deal with situations like that. And it's a word called mindfulness. We've got a lot to deal with, not only the stresses of COVID, but of course the challenges of dealing with the economy and what we do in our jobs. After 6 months of living in this strange world, before COVID, we were on a particular sort of treadmill, chasing targets, keeping our businesses afloat. But it just got more difficult in many senses during lockdown. In some ways, we were with families. We could spend time with them, and that was easier for us. And I think on a day-to-day basis, if we can survive our sort of tsunami of Zoom meetings and telephone check-ins, now we've got all these fake news and the the contending dialogues about what is democracy, what is business, what is disease, what is flu, what is COVID. And as if it's so hard to tell truth and fiction anymore, and to know where we stand. And in many senses, a lot of the very bases of what was our identity and what made us stable has been shaken by this. Now, I don't think that's necessarily all bad. You know, at the moment, we're level 1 lockdown, and there's a massive desire to kind of normalize the new and go back on that same treadmill and pull those levers in the organization to make it all happen. But for me, the big challenge now is, in this change world, is what levers should you pull and why? You can't just go back and start pulling all the levers you used to, because in many ways they're not even connected in the same way to get things done, or to the same people. We're living in a virtual world. We're working, planning online. We're having to work in a low distance environment, which means we haven't got that feedback. I remember when I was a kid, my dad used to give me a steering wheel, and it had a sucker on the end. You'd stick it on the dashboard and sit in the passenger seat, and he'd be steering, and I'd be pretending I was driving, turning the steering wheel around. And some days I think maybe we all feel a bit like that. We're holding the steering wheel of our business, we're twirling it around, desperate to make it work, but it doesn't seem to be connected to anything in the same way. In fact, we don't know quite how to connect it. We're making a lot of noise, but what do we do in our businesses in these circumstances? And so our minds get busier and busier, and we get more and more concerned. Well, there are ways that we can deal with it. I think if we get panicked, we tend to focus on the problem to the exclusion of everything else. Now, I used to be an airline pilot, funnily enough, for part of my life. And you don't want your pilot to be panicked. If they get upset, you don't want them just touching every lever. You calm down, and you focus, and you just take a deep breath, and you go back to the process and work out what to do. So if we focus on the problem, we get frantic about solving that thing in front of us, we're not often dealing with the deeper causes in ourselves or in our businesses. What are the deep drivers in our businesses? How do we get to pull the right levers? I remember, I don't know if any of you are football fans, I'm sure a lot of you are, and this dates me, but I remember the fantastic Manchester United team, and they had these two great players called Dwight York and Andy Cole, and they scored 53 goals between them in the sort of 98, 99 season, a long time ago. But they were legendary because there was something about them that allowed them to sense where the other one was all the time. And they were able to be playing, and part of their mind, they weren't just focused like this, they were open. They could see the peripheral vision. They had the peripheral vision. They could see what was going around, and they had a wonderful situational awareness. And so they, like poetry, they knew where each other was, and they would play to and from each other in an almost magical way that was just a wonderful thing to see. And that's why they were so brilliant in soccer. And then I remember there was this Australian guy I met. He was an Olympic trainer. He trained the teams in different sports. And he showed me this other video of these two other great soccer stars, like Ronaldinho and Messi in the same team. But these guys hated each other, and they were both brought into the same team, and they were desperately competitive with each other. And there was this wonderful video of this ball looping into the penalty area like this in front of an open goal. And these two people hammering down towards it, desperate to score a goal. And they were so narrowly focused, they couldn't even see each other, and just went smashed into each other, fell down, and the ball just trickled over past the goalpost and out of play. And that's what happens when you lose your peripheral vision, when you can't see the context anymore. And tension and panic and anxiety starts to make us much more target focused, and it actually works against us. So a great tool for getting your peripheral vision back and your situational vision back and honing it better is called mindfulness. And I'm going to talk about that for a few minutes. I think it's a really important part of leadership, and a critical part increasingly of the best programs on management schools offered by business schools. Mindful leaders, they're people who think more they, bizarrely enough, there are people who come less attached to their thoughts. They can see their thoughts and their feelings and let them be, and not have those thoughts hook them and drag them away. There's a wonderful British cognitive scientist called Guy Claxton who wrote this book called Harebrain, Harebrain and Tortoise Mind. A hare is like, it runs fast like a cheetah, and a tortoise goes very slowly. And he talks about these two minds that we all have. This very smart, frontal cortex mind that's working away, getting ideas, coming up with solutions, taking 10 to the dozen, like I am now, really fast. And this tortoise mind, this slow sense-making capability we all have that you really can't force into fast action. And I'm sure a lot of us have these sort of epiphanies in times of detachment from everything that's going on in the world. I mean, you may play golf, you may run, you may cycle, you may walk, you may have hobbies, you may be cooking, maybe having a shower, or maybe doing the gardening. But for those times when you stop churning on in your own mind, obsessing in it with our thoughts, and you just let it go, and you somehow relax. And what happens then is another part of our minds start working. And if you've ever woken up one morning with this amazing insight, this problem, you slept on it, and the answer came, it's that slow, that tortoise mind that's working on it. It works in its own way. When we're concentrating on something else and not letting those obsessive thoughts just drag us along, this other part of ourselves, this deep sense-making mind, starts to have a good, starts to make some sense for us. And sorry about that. And starts to actually stop us from, starts to allow these deeper senses to come to the surface. And those things I would call epiphanies, great deep insights that we can't force. Another great book is by a Nobel Prize winning author called Daniel Kahneman, who writes about thinking fast and slow. And he talks about all the cognitive distortions and these errors of our minds that we don't know about, that when we think fast, we think are true. And I think this is why we get so caught up in conspiracy theories or all these other things, or fake news. We believe it has to make sense. But that deeper part of our mind, which is worrying but works in its own way, needs to be given its time. So I think we place too much confidence in our own judgment sometimes, and we don't hold it in enough doubt. We have strong opinions strongly held, where probably the better way to do that is have strong opinions, but lightly held. Now, why lightly? And I think that's interesting, because if you've got strong opinions, then you come forward with what you believe. But if you have some skepticism about your own mind and your own judgments, which is healthy, because none of us are all right all the time, that allows you to lightly hold those strong opinions. And when somebody else comes with good argument or good insights, it allows you to see them and move. And I think these capabilities are really important. So in a sense, we have to slow down the narrative, clear out the clutter in our heads, and let these answers to questions we might not even know we had. We need to let those answers emerge. And sometimes we really can't force them. And in that process, we have to become more and more in touch with the authentic versions of ourselves, not the versions we've allowed ourselves to become through our obsessions, or what our parents wanted us to be, or what we think the companies want to be, not those artificial avatars and persona we present, but who are the real selves? Who are the real people? Because it's in that real person that you are that the real power of your insight and creativity, and in fact your achievement, comes. Because you can force yourselves into achievement, but how valid is that? How important is that for you as a person? There was a wonderful line that I saw the other day on social media, which was, "What do you refuse to feel? What do you refuse to feel?" And I think a lot of people interpret that as being, well, I'm not going to feel negative. I'm not going to. It's not about that at all. Is what is it? What are the places to go, the doors in your mind you don't want to open, simply because it's a little bit too painful and too hard? And what happens is we close those doors and we put a lot of energy into closing them, but actually they're often not so dangerous. They actually hold the key to the new sense of insights and powers you have. So practicing mindfulness allows you to start to go into those places more easily and to make sense of what we avoid, and rather less painfully start to see those things we're in denial about And very often we see, wow, there's a deep truth there that's going to help me. And when we develop a familiarity with the shadow areas of ourselves, we unlock the true wells of our creativity and our latent power. I often think these shadows, these things, they're like dogs on a leash. It's like these powerful emotions. It's your choice whether you allow them to come untrained to control you and drag you around, whether you face them, train them, and control them. And then they power you to where you want to go rather than dragging you everywhere. And that's all about self knowledge. So the more you practice mindfulness, and I'm not going to give a lesson in that, you can read up about this, the less you're captured in your daily sort of vexations. And the more the bigger existential important issues start to come into view. It's like those soccer players, instead of being obsessed, you're starting to see wide, and there's a sense of relief and say, aha, okay. It doesn't give you a fantastic answer, but it gives you much more potential and a clear direction. I often say it's better to be vaguely right than precisely wrong. It gets you into the vaguely right area. Oh, that's where I should go. And then you walk in to explore it. And then it becomes clearer what levers you should pull. What are the big levers that are really connected to something? And then when you calm yourself down, say, well, if I pull that, that's connected to that, to that, to that, and that. Wow, and things start to happen. And you start to get this insight and you go further for less effort, for more cause. Over the time, and you won't be so frantic either. And the compound effect of this is it can be as magical as it is massive. You know, I don't play golf, but I have tried a few times. But what I did learn from my coaches, the harder you try to hit the ball, the tenser you are and the more unsuccessful you're going to be. It's like you can't drive for that ball to go somewhere. You've got to have a rhythm, a positioning, and a flow, and you've got to let it happen. And that whole flow, when you swing into the ball, you lean into your swing, the ball hits and it flies magically to somewhere you wouldn't believe it would have gone. And the more you try, it tenses up. And I think that is really why these arts of mindfulness, meditation, focusing on the breath are so important to us now and are really important to leadership. There's so many leaders who practice these things, and perhaps you should too. You know, it used to be the preserve of the gurus in the ashrams, and you don't have to do that. You know, I actually did in my 20s for about 4 years. I lived in a Hindu ashram, and it was odd. Why would I do that? But I have to tell you, it's through my life, it's been one of the most helpful things I ever did, and it's allowed me to switch off a bit and just to put myself in doubt a little bit in a healthy way, and start to see other people's perspectives and the bigger views. You can download apps now that really help you. There's so many of them, and I think you should try. And a lot of you may know that those books by Yuval Noah Harari, who wrote *Sapiens*, *Homo Deus*, and 21 Lessons for the 21st Century. Now, that's an amazing author who's come up with so many ideas that are defining. He's a historian, actually, and defining our existence and what life means and what the future will be and what human beings are going to be. He spends 2 hours a day meditating and takes a month off every year in a silent, technology-free retreat. I mean, who would have thought? And for him, our future superpower is that old mantra of know ourselves. We need to know our thoughts, our emotions, our assumptions, and our chosen identities. You know, who we are is a bit more than these narrow choices or this flood of thoughts we have. You know, these thoughts that we have in our minds, they're obsessive. But they're not always the truth. They're thoughts, and our feelings captivate us, and we think our feelings are so important. But when you meditate, when you're mindful, you can watch these thoughts come and go and say, aha, you can watch the feelings come and go, and you start to not be so dragged around by them. You say, well, they're just thoughts, they're just emotions. Why this is important for him is he talks about the future of artificial intelligence and algorithms, and he's saying that, you know, once we start to get sensors beyond the skin level, under the skin, and nanotechnology and sensors into how we are, how we feel, you can look at a computer and we have ways being where your eyes go, where you pay attention, sensing your emotions. All these things are coming to us now. Before long, there would be so much of that data flooding into people that some people know if you like this or that, and they'll present a different sort of advert or a different sort of thing to you based on your personal preferences, and you won't even know that's happening. So if you don't want to be a victim of these algorithms. If you don't want to become a consumerist or behavioral puppet, he says, you really need to get to know ourselves. And if we want to do that, we've got to practice disciplines like mindfulness. It helps us help other people too. So we need to still this mess in our minds. Most of all, we need to break the sort of semi-automated response that chain us to the hamster wheel that's spinning faster and faster than it even did in March. If we don't, we'll find ourselves frantically doing the same things all the time, desperately trying to get a different result, but we cannot possibly get a different result that way. So the big discipline and skill we need now is to practice things like mindfulness. So in the last minute or so, if I'm talking, just to regain our sense of perspective, we build more mastery of our own lives by doing mindfulness, which has been tested over the last 6 months. It's going to be tested even further as we go into the fourth industrial revolution, but a post-pandemic one as well. But our greatest weapon will be our mental resilience, a strong sense of purpose, a profound empathy with other people, and a knowledge that we're not the same, we're fundamentally equally vulnerable to the future. And so we have to collaborate and work with each other. And to do that properly, we have to know ourselves. And so I think that's why the greatest leadership programs found, some of the greatest leaders are really practicing this idea of mindfulness to gain this mastery. So thank you very much for listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the Dean and Director of Henley Business School Africa, Mr. John Foster Pedley. A really great narration on self-knowledge and self-awareness. It actually reminded me of a recent article that was released stating that 75% of careers are derailed for reasons relating to emotional competencies. And I mean, you had mentioned, Mr. Pedley, how we should censor our emotions and censor where our eyes go, still the mess in our minds so that we can focus going forward. I really appreciated the question that you posed to say, what do we refuse to feel? And by answering that question, that is a accurate practice of mindfulness and self-knowledge there. And once again, it reminded me of the quote that says, knowledge of others is wisdom, but knowledge of yourself is enlightenment. So it comes back to saying, how do we manage a locus of control when it comes to forging ahead business-wise and forging ahead in tough times? I mean, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot escape that 2020 has been one of the most difficult years that we've ever had to face, not only because of the pandemic, but as narrated earlier on, that, 6 million people in the US lost their jobs. In South Africa, we're looking at about, 3.5 million people or so, which was in addition to the 30% unemployment rate that we had. So it's been quite a challenging year. It's been quite challenging times. So thank you very much, Mr. Pedley, for reminding us the importance of stilling the mess in our minds, the importance of practicing mindfulness as a way to overcome issues of self-knowledge. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Do visit the website of Henley Business School and check how you can participate either as a student or as a potential stakeholder. Moving right along to our panel discussion. I really look forward to this panel discussion because I think we have a tendency to classify industries as one is important than the other. And yesterday, even with our panel discussion around energy, we had a speaker, our acting CEO of EWCETA, who emphasized the importance of TVET colleges, to say TVET colleges offer a form of practicality that a lot of universities and learning institutions don't offer. And I think this is then concomitant to this panel discussion that we'll be having now around the scarcity of skilled artisans in South Africa. This discussion will then be led by Dr. Sean Jones, who is the CEO of Artisan Training Institute. And I mean, a lot of us don't know or pretty much understand what artisans do. yet they are the most important stakeholders in the industry when it comes to fault finding, manufacturing, repairing, servicing, and so forth, because it's a skilled type of trade. So, how do we then revolutionize and make sure that that industry, receives the innovation that it deserves when it comes to linking it with digital skills? So, I certainly look forward to the panel discussion, and I will now hand over to Dr. Sean Jones, who will then introduce the panelists that will be joining him in the discussion. Over to you, Dr. Jones.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to welcome all the panelists. Thank you very much for joining us. With us this morning, we have Dr. Jason Scales, who's a business manager for education from Lincoln Electric. He is currently sitting in the USA. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you.
James McKenzie, who's managing director for Training Force. William Mohali, departmental manager, skills development and training for the AIDC. And Dr. Anthony Gier, who's a program manager for social sustainability from the National Business Initiative. Welcome, James.
Morning, thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Thank you.
Great. If you would indulge me, I'd like to just create a bit of context around the topic, which is scarcity of skilled artisans in South Africa. And after I've created context, I'll open up for the rest of the panel to proceed. In particular, South Africa has been challenged with massive unemployment. We're currently sitting at around about 35% unemployment, with youth unemployment sitting at a staggering 60%. In addition to that, one of the things that I always find challenging when we talk about scarcity of skills are the media generalizations around around the scarcity. There is broad comments, but in reality, there's an oversupply in some skills and an undersupply in others. For example, a lot of young people choose to go the electrical route and are given incorrect career guidance. And the real demands, for example, in my opinion, lie in the diesel mechanic trade and also in instrumentation and other trades that are developing into more technician status. So that warrants some discussion, in my opinion. And then we also live with this strange contradiction of skill shortages, but massive unemployment. So we need to figure that one out. And this brings into question the linkages between government, industry, and educational institutional networks. And we really do need to examine these networks to understand these linkages and why we have this disparity in terms of outcomes and high unemployment. The other driving factor is a loss of experience to other markets. At ATI in 2017, we had one client who lost 17 diesel mechanics in 1 year to New Zealand. And we, once again, this is of massive concern. And then in terms of government policy, there is a drive to encourage the skilled trades. And we need to question, how can we produce quantity and quality? Because at the moment, we know that the quality is not where it should be, both in basic education and also in terms of what's coming out of the TVET. And the other key point that I think cannot be ignored is gender. There are more and more women coming into the engineering trades and other trades as well. And this is a positive move because women have do very well in those trades, particularly when the climate is properly set at a company level. And then we also need to perhaps examine how current and future demands for skills will change, because things are moving exceptionally quickly nowadays, and with technology driving these changes, we need to be aware of this. And with that, the role of digital strategies to improve outcomes of our training. And finally, from a contextual point of view, I think career guidance has always been substandard in my view. I think we need to make parents, youth, and educators more aware of the value of mid-level skills, such as artisan skills, and start encouraging that. So without any further ado, I'd like to hand over. And Jason, you're sitting in the States. I'm not aware of how familiar you are with our context, but do you have any opening comments that you'd like to make?
No, and one, thank you for allowing me to participate in the panel. It's quite exciting to learn about, what's going on around the world. And I think that even though continents separate us, water separates us, I think globally we just fundamentally have an issue, and that's attracting a new workforce into skills. And it doesn't matter if we're in the United States, if we're in Africa, if we're in South America, we all have the same challenge, and that's just attracting the right talent to fill these pipelines of work that we have. And when you think about the role of education, industry, and government, I mean, we all have a role in it, and that's why Lincoln Electric, the welding company, we're engaging in education in a completely different way, because not only do we understand where the technologies are going, but we also understand the skills and the varying different skills that we need in welding that's going to keep the industry propped up and keep the industry very strong. So why would we not get involved and engaged at a different level? And I think too, when you look at the challenge of filling the pipeline, it goes back to how are we promoting ourselves? So if I put out the image of welding to the masses, do I want a dirty, gringy, old, manufacturing facility that has sparks flying all over the place and there's things going on? That may not be the image that we want to portray it with. It's got to be something that's more exciting and more engaging or more representative of what we're doing today. So I even say that sometimes we're our own worst enemy by putting out the wrong imagery about a skill or the wrong imagery about the type of work that people can engage in. So it's not a silver bullet that's going to fix this. It's a multi-pronged approach. There's different ways to engage at different levels, and there's different stakeholders that we really have to talk to. So I'll pause there, but it's thank you for allowing me to participate in the panel today, and I look forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you, Jason. James, would you like to share your views?
Yeah, morning, Sean. Morning, everyone. Thanks for also having me on the panel. I think it's exactly what Jason was saying. I think in South Africa specifically, we've got massive graduate unemployment, and I think there's a massive requirement to reintroduce the trades at a school career level. The technical schools have fallen by the wayside in South Africa as well in terms of technical qualifications. I think generally, what happened, obviously you either go academically or technically. I think there's been a huge drive to get people into universities rather than into what industry actually requires. So I think there's a drastic re-engineering we require, specifically after COVID. And I think partnering with industries and big industries as well on the technology side, and I think really getting learners from school into workplace. And I think the concept of micro-credentialing as well, and building up towards a qualification as opposed to the qualification being the proxy to entry into jobs, because I think there's a big drive in South Africa, also because of our legacy, for people to get degrees rather than on-the-job working experience. And I think there are a number of programs and incentives in South Africa through learnerships, apprenticeships, etc., that really encourage companies to bring youth specifically into workplaces. So again, I think the whole system needs to be flipped and put on its head. As opposed to going to university, we need to be building towards what industry requires. And again, I think, like Jason says, I think we are our worst enemy. I think how we position trades in terms of a career choice is going to be critical in that process. Sean?
Jason, yeah, James, thank you for that. And I concur with what you're saying. I remember When I was young, up until the mid 80s, a lot of parents defaulted to telling their kids to go and get a trade, and it seemed to become out of vogue on a global scale. Jason, I'm sure you'd agree with us that where parents suddenly flipped into totally focused on university, and many kids forced into university when they really should not have been there, and used their unique, different intelligence somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. William, do you have any comments that you'd like to make based on what Jason and James have shared with us, and your own views as well, please?
Good morning to everyone, and thanks for getting me on the panel to share my my experience with the rest of the team. I fully concur with what my previous colleagues have said already. The challenge indeed, among others, that I want to bring on board here is about the mismatch of the qualification and the supply of needs, needs in terms of the industry itself. But mainly and in most cases is that if one takes, for example, a situation whereby TVET colleges are offering trades or programs, most of the programs that are being offered at a TVET sector level are a real mismatch to what the industry needs are. And that by itself creates a very serious challenge in as far as the employment issues is concerned. So having said that in particular is that up to a point where there is a collaborative effort that speaks to bringing the two parties together, training will run parallel to what the job needs are. And having said that, indeed, from the document that is prepared by the Department of Higher Education and Training, namely the skills supply and demand in South Africa, it's clear if one reads it carefully that indeed what the education sector is doing is parallel to what the industry needs are. There is a serious mismatch there. And the other issue is that even though learners are enrolled, for instance, at the TVET sector level, most of them don't necessarily meet the entrance requirements to deal with a particular trade against which they are being trained. The second issue in that same space is that the interests of the learners are not necessarily with the training that they are offering. Given the challenges that the country finds itself in terms of the unemployment figures that today are over 30%, which is very, very disturbing and alarming indeed. We realize that instead of parents and the communities directing learners where their interests are and where the interests in terms of the skills shortages are, they just say to a learner, go to a TVET college or so, as long as my child, you are outside my house and you are occupied by doing something. So that by itself also does not necessarily assist us in any way to drive this. So there is a serious challenge, and we know how long it takes. It doesn't take any period below 3 years for curriculum to change. And in that space, a lot of damage is done already. You did make mention also in your opening scene when you make mention of a number of trades that are in high demand. I can just briefly, in closing for now, mention among other critical in the industry, wherein also we don't get more learners into in that space. One of which, among others, will be the autotronics. The other one is the mechatronics. The other one is auto electrician, panel beaters, spray painters, boiler makers, mechanical fitters, motor mechanics, welding, and the one you mentioned, the instrumentation. Now, when we look into the TVET sector itself, visit any of the nearby TVET colleges, you won't find this combination in there at all. And that's point one. And lastly, the other point will be, there is no experiential training enforced in the syllabus itself to say, before you come back, say you are doing N1 or N2 or so, before you come back, you must have been linked with the industry in order to do your experiential training. And that speaks to partnerships and linkages, which indeed remains a challenge so far. Thanks, Sin, back to you.
William, thank you for your input. I think you've raised some very important points there, and I appreciate it. Anthony, you've been involved for many years in artisanal training in various different sectors, including TVET, private, and corporate roles. Would you like to share some of your views, and also perhaps, gents, what we should do once Anthony shared that is start looking more at what the solutions are, because there's nothing worse. I think we're becoming very aware of some of these key issues, and then after Anthony shared his inputs, maybe we can start talking about how we can address some of these scarce skills issues. And
yeah, thanks, Sean. I think it's always good to go last because you can so feeding off what James and William have both alluded to. I think my biggest concern is the biggest concern in the work that I do is around how we achieve meaningful economic inclusion, and the underlying challenge that we face is that our economy is fundamentally not transforming, and there's still very strong structural inequity between the bottom of the pyramid and what happens in your relatively small but powerful formal sector. And we're struggling to create the linkages between these two. We haven't really cracked that. So it means that a large number of our young people are effectively locked out of meaningful economic activity. And from a skills development point of view, it has a number of implications. One, that access to artisan training is very restrictive. It's very exclusionary, and the system is quite rigid. It doesn't really allow for broader inclusion and broader access for particularly young people from poorer communities. That's the one side of it. And then the other side of it is that we're spending a hell of a lot of money and we're getting very little return in terms of employment and growth. So there's these two sides to the issue that we're trying to tackle. The one is how do you create a system as both previous speakers have spoken to, that's more agile, more responsive, and that's targeted more at where the needs are. But on the other hand, how do you make sure that there are these meaningful pathways into those opportunities, and that you can have a more inclusionary approach to that? So that's really the kind of focus of our work. It's to take it much more from a bottom-up perspective. Obviously, you've got to deal with policy issues, you've got to deal with regulatory issues, you've got to deal with systemic issues that really restrict the system to produce, but then you've also got to have solutions in terms of how you respond to those from the ground, how you create different mechanisms for young people to access opportunities. So I don't talk about, and I'm a little bit disruptive, I suppose, in this regard, but I don't talk a lot about trades per se, in the form of like the focus on artisans and the almost mythical thing we've created about producing artisans. What I think we have to look at it a bit more broadly is to look at it as artisanal skills and trade skills, and that there are a myriad of applications of trade skills outside of the formal trades, in terms of that, you don't have to wait 3 years to produce a qualified person to do various sorts of artisanal skills that can result in employment, self-employment, and that sort of thing. So we look at it from a much broader, more holistic perspective. And when you envision that, then the system starts to open up, and the possibilities start to open up, rather than being constrained by narrow qualifications, narrow conceptualizations of what we mean by trades and what we mean by artisans. But I'll
Thank you very much. Yeah, great, Anthony. I think within some of your comments there may lie some of the solutions we're looking for. And if you look at the economy in Africa and how things have worked, James, you also touched on the concept of credentialing, and it kind of echoes what Anthony's saying. And if you look at how people buy things in Africa, you know, they often buy in smaller units. So they'll buy one cigarette at a time instead of a pack, or a sachet of alcohol, or a and so we almost need to relook at pricing models and how you could create modules and package modules that could help achieve what Anthony's saying, where we could have economically active participation without having to go through a full-on artisanal qualification. So it makes sense. James, do you want to add anything to what Anne said there?
Absolutely, Sean. I think the biggest challenge we've got is exactly, I mean, you know, we've got, excuse me, 6.7 million youth that are unemployed. And they, like I was saying earlier, the education system, even, you know, I don't know the dropout rate for degrees, you know, people dropping out after 2 or 3 years. So I really think the ability to bring people into workplaces and start earning, even through small skills and building towards a qualification, is definitely one of the solutions in Africa and in South Africa. You know, the examples when I was at Barloworld, where people were studying BComs, but at the same time were doing apprenticeship programs, diesel mechanic programs at the same time. So they were earning stipends, and so their ability to start earning and getting practical experience while they were studying correspondence. And I think the online world has opened up that opportunity now. So for the ability for you to still go and do your mainstream BCom or whatever thing online while you're actually earning on the job, getting practical experience. The examples I use is after 3 years, there was a group of young kids that exited Barloworld with BComs, 20 of them with BCom degrees, and were qualified diesel mechanics. And so the ability for those individuals now, a number of them have started their own businesses. And I think also a huge opportunity in South Africa is really in the SMME space. I think we need to really focus to say, especially with the high unemployment rates, companies are not going to be able to absorb as many learners or appies into their workplaces. So how do we create a space where we can start creating entrepreneurs and start having those discussions at a school level, you know, sort of start bringing entrepreneurial discussions and skills at a school going level to say, you know what, you know, the normal process of exiting, going to university and getting a job is no longer the norm. We need to look at things very differently, I think. And, you know, there are great opportunities for that. So absolutely, I think it starts at an education, a school level, career level, but also companies need to relook at how we, you know, how we recruit and how we attract talent into our organizations. We shouldn't be saying you need a minimum degree. We should be saying, actually, we need people with, you know, native qualifications or technical qualifications that we can grow and develop into our businesses.
Yeah. Jason, I'm going to bring you in a minute because I want to hear from William, and it'll give you a nice opportunity to give us your views from a Dutch economy perspective. So, William, if you could just share your views on some of these comments that have been made.
I might have missed you. Just reiterate the question
William,
again.
if just your views on some of the points that Anthony and James have raised.
Okay. Yeah. No, thanks a lot. Yeah. In terms of what my previous colleagues have alluded to, it remains a challenge indeed in terms of bringing the two together. Because what's key here now, what the country needs more than anything else, it's hands-on. You know, one has to really move away from a classroom approach point of view in terms of alleviating the poverty in the country, as well as unemployment rates in the country, and move these learners to a practical situation, a practical environment wherein they will realize it's not just there to be read, the reality in terms of translating it into practice. So what I see as a disjuncture, which really comes out from time to time, and also to my colleagues, is that up to a point where before a learner is being enrolled, be it at a university or at a TVET college, the question is, where does your interest lie? What is it that you want to do? Because I think one of my colleagues did make mention of the stipend. What we see now of late happening in terms of training is that we've got what you call stipend. For as long as I've got money for transport, I've got money for something to eat and drink, for me, it's okay. As to what happens with what I'm doing, it's immaterial. And from the sector skills trend that one looks into from a SETA point of view, one realizes how much is wasted through stipend payment, because you will find that Elena would register for 2 different trades at the same time, and Elena also receiving stipends in all these instances. And in no way would this learner even be able to complete the training that he or she undertakes. So at the end of the day, it's time wasted, money wasted. And now again, we are stuck with what you call unemployment that's going up. The question one would ask is, don't we have long careers? Or the second issue would be, even after training, do they really satisfy the employer's needs? You realize that the papers that they are coming up with, be it from whichever institution, does not speak in any way to what BMW would require, to what VW would require, or any employer would require. And this is where the disjuncture is. And lastly and briefly, I would also want to bring this issue of the trades that indeed, when one looks into the TVET sector perhaps in particular, you realize that most of the trades that are being pursued in those institutions do not speak to the auto sector. Less than 20% of them speak to that. And what is disheartening the most would be, one has a TVET sector a few meters, less than 5 kilometers away from BMW or away from the auto manufacturing also. But none of the program offerings in that institution speak to what the industry needs are. You realize that most of the trades offered there, or most of occupations offered in that college, speak to business related, be it administration, be it personnel management or so. And in the same cohort or conurbation within which where the TVET sector is situated, the unemployment is very high. So we should come to a point where we niche programs with employment within the surrounding where the TVET college or education institution, so that we can then say we train for employment and for entrepreneurship. But as we speak now, neither of the two is being addressed. And then the other last issue is the pass rate is very, very deploring. It's very low, and no one would even bother as an employer to go and assist that. And that's why most of such institutions are not even sponsored by employers, because the question is, what is there for me? Thank you. Back to you.
Yeah, William, you've painted quite a bleak picture of the TVET landscape. And I do think there are a handful of TVETs that are doing very well, but the vast majority, unfortunately, do reflect the picture that you've painted. Jason, hearing some of the issues that have been raised and some of the key points, how does this echo for you in sitting in a developed economy like America? Are there any similarities or dissimilarities?
Absolutely, there are. We have the same challenges because what happened was, we in the United States and even in developed economies, we pushed everybody to the university as well. We said, you need to either you're going to do this, or you're going to do this over here. And we need to change it from the word or to the word and. You can do this and you can do that. And really start building out the choices. The other challenge that we have is, when we all grew up, we probably tinkered in the garage with somebody. We built things with our hands. We did things that today a lot of youth just don't have the opportunity to do. And so they don't understand what the skilled trades offer. They have no concept of what somebody in the building trades might do. They don't understand what a person as a mechanic or a technician at a BMW dealership might do. They don't realize how many computers are in a BMW, and that is, it's more about interfacing with technology than it is sometimes turning the wrench. And so the question really becomes, and we're struggling with this too, even here in the US, is how do you now let these youth or incumbent workers, unemployed, to engage with an area in the skilled trades, to develop an understanding of it, to see if they even like it. Is it something that they would want to do for the rest of their life, or something they would get engaged in? And there's nothing wrong with somebody coming in to take a class and then saying, you know what, that's not really for me. I think I need to go to the diesel mechanic side. I really like working with the mechanics and understanding that and trying it. And so it's I think the path forward is you have a career development pathway that has a bunch of on-ramps and off-ramps to it, where people might get back into the education sector to get more skills or skill up. And that's where short-term certificates come in. Those stackable certificates that bring either more opportunities in the employment sector or allow them to go explore in a different way. So if you have more on-ramps and off-ramps, then you have more flexibility in the system for people to come in and get reskilled, upskilled, or meet what the employers are now doing and adopting technology. So like I said, it's not that there's one silver bullet here. It's more about how do we get access to the people that need it to develop those skills or get those credentials. And then how do we start really marketing it so people can truly begin to engage with it in a different way to understand what the opportunities really are.
And Jason, from a funding point of view, how is that how are those pathways funded in the US?
So what's going on right now, when you look at the school sector, it used to be that you would not count a student as a completer until they got the diploma. It was either a 2-year diploma or a 4-year diploma. And now the rules are changing to where if they get a certificate or short-term credentials, we're starting to be able to count those as completers, which goes into the metrics of the government funding that helps fund those schools and those trade schools. And so that's why I'm saying it's not just a singular approach to fix this. It's really going to be a multi-layered approach. And if we have 6.7 million youth that are unemployed or don't have an opportunity to go get those skills or go skill up, that's a significant problem on top of the 34% that are employed. So it's just in the US with COVID, we lost our hospitality market. I mean, there was just as many jobs in restaurant and hospitality as there was in manufacturing. So now the question is, how do you now reskill up all those people, get all those incumbent workers back into that employment pipeline, but really get them the right skills for the right job at the right time, and we can start to find some more success.
Yeah, some good points. I think our challenge also lies in funding. We just don't have the resources, as Anthony pointed out earlier, to do large-scale quality programs like this. And maybe a solution lies in some of the digital learning opportunities that are out there. Anthony, do you have any comments around that challenge?
Look, I don't think it's a case of that we don't necessarily have the money. I mean, you could argue that we don't have the money, but I don't think that that's necessarily the primary issue. I think it's a big primary issue is the way the money is spent. When we started out, and MBI has been doing work in the kind of artisanal space and the TVET space for the last couple of decades. And we started out doing, trying to solve the problem of artisan development. A lot of the focus was on our large industries. A lot of the focus was on our formal apprenticeship system. And we tried to see how we could scale that up, how we could grow artisans over and above what companies were training at the time, and ramp up the number of artisans that we could produce. We didn't crack it, and we still haven't cracked it. And we've had decades of the artisan, and we've had various sorts of initiatives, and we're still focusing very much on growing our formal apprenticeships system and in different ways, whether it's traditional, whether it's through the dual system or whatever it is. The fact of the matter is we don't have enough money for that system. We're not growing. We're not growing the number of artisans that we're developing on an annual basis. We go through, we go through these processes of saying that we need to, increase the number of artisans in the economy, but we don't have the resources to produce them through the current system as it exists. That's the one side of the equation. So for me, it's the way that the money is spent. The other side of the equation is that we still have a large number of those unemployed youth who will never access that artisan training system. So effectively, the system itself is quite exclusionary. As I've said, the barriers to entry are quite high, unless you have the right networks, you've come from the right educational background, and you meet a whole lot of really strict criteria, the chances are you're never going to be able to ever embark on a career towards becoming an artist. So we need to relook at our models. We need to relook at how we use our limited resources more effectively to have a much broader base of opportunity. And to my mind, the key thing is twofold. One is where are the jobs? Because we should be focusing on where are the jobs. You've already alluded to the fact that we're training too many electricians. Even if we reduce the number of electricians and focused on other trades, the thing is we don't have enough jobs, right, to even absorb a lot of the artisans that we're producing. So, and even if we did, again, we're still not cracking. We're not going to crack the unemployment situation that way, because we're only ever going to be able to produce very few jobs in that sort of mold. So the question is, where are the jobs? And I think we've already alluded to some extent to the fact that the large number of jobs, or the job potential, employment growth potential, is in the SME environment. It's not in our large companies. Our large companies are not labor absorbing. Yes, they're training apprentices, they're training artisans, but then they release them. And then what happens to them? So the question is, we see the opportunity, we haven't even begun to unlock the potential of the SME environment for employing young people that want to or aspire to become artisans one day, and can get into, through a limited scope of intervention, of training, can get into workplaces and start embarking on that career path outside of the formal apprenticeship system. So that's the key thing. But to unlock that potential is quite a significant, because in the last 25 years, we haven't really unlocked the full potential of our SME environment. We know that our entrepreneurial or our level of entrepreneurship in the country is quite low. So we have to put a much more concentrated effective on the demand side of unlocking the opportunities across the economy, and not just focusing on our very small, large-scale, large-sized companies in our formal sector. So that's on the demand side, and I think that's a critical thing. On the supply side, it's that the pathways have to be broadened. We have to think out of the box and be more disruptive in terms of the kinds of pathways that we're creating into opportunity. If we can unlock the demand, if we can look at our SME environment, and remember that in many of the industries that we're talking about, and I'm talking outside of, but even in the automotive and other industries that are quite, strongly focused on high-end manufacturing, the larger the number of the industries that we're talking about are made up of large numbers of micro businesses, many of them which operate in the informal economy. So in the plumbing sector, we know that 83% of our businesses are informal. Now, if 83% of our businesses are informal, and we're expecting to produce, plumbers, we have to be able to untap or, unlock the opportunities in that broader informal sector. So the SME environment is quite a complex and quite a broad-based thing that we have to focus on, and we're working on solutions around how we do that. How do we meaningfully transform that bottom end of the economy, that large informal economy that has to now, be brought into formalization, be brought into, supply chains and value chains and that sort of thing. But then on the supply side, the issue is now, how do you respond to that demand? And that requires different approaches to trading, right, and preparation of young people. We can't afford to run apprenticeships in the way and learnerships in the way that we're doing them, and that whole thing around doing the same thing over and over and not having a different result. We can't continue to proliferate the kinds of models that we've been using over the last 20 years and expect a different result. We need new models of supply of skills, We need to disrupt the system, whether it's micro-credentialing, whether it's stackable, whatever the lovely terms that we like to use these days. I think the point about it is that it's really about, how do we link into the demand? How do we train for jobs, not for qualifications? And I think we've made that point already. Qualifications can follow. Yes, you can, and we want everyone to work towards qualification. We want to give equal opportunity for our large numbers of young people, particularly marginalized young people, to work towards qualification. That requires different learning pathways. It requires opening up vocational pathways in a very different and more creative space. And that requires changing the system, because the system doesn't allow us to do that. So I spend a lot of my time trying to convince people, particularly people in government, people in industry, people in our CETAs and all over the place, that the system doesn't work. And it's a very hard sell, because everyone's got vested interest in making the system work as it currently does. It's linked into our skills development, levies, and it's linked into our BBBE, requirements. It's linked into a whole lot of incentives that don't facilitate employment. You actually have to disrupt the skills development system completely. And you have to see the alignment of what you're doing in the TVET system to what's needed in industry where the jobs are. And that's a different sort of approach. It's not like saying, companies, the large company, are able to train, so we must train for that. No, we have to look at where is the alignment in terms of economic growth, economic recovery. Where are the sectors where we can really grow jobs, particularly in our SME environment? How do we unlock those on the demand side? And then how do we line up the supply with alternative pathways and alternative training interventions, that different forms of recognition, as we said, micro-credentialing, whatever it is, different forms of recognition that can quite easily get more large numbers of young people into workplaces, let them train on the job, let them work towards qualifications over time, but just get them into the jobs in the first instance. Find the jobs and get them into the jobs, and then you can build from there. Sorry, that was a bit of a long response.
No, but Anthony, I think you're raising really important points, especially within the context of where we sit. James, do you think, reflecting on what Anne's saying, there could be more focus on ARPL, that's the recognition of prior learning, because if you look at the markets, particularly in the township environments, and that there are a lot of people doing artisanal work, but don't have any recognition for it. Do you think there's a role that we could focus on there?
Yeah, Sean, absolutely. I mean, you think of the town economy, and you think of roadside mechanics, you think of welding guys on the side of the road, etc. And those guys and ladies aren't brought into the economy. I think companies also now, with the impact of COVID, aren't going to be in a position to absorb more employees. So we need to be looking at our broader supply chain within the communities that companies operate within as well, and say, how do we incorporate those individuals into the mainstream training initiatives and funding? The focus has really been on employees and then providing a workplace experience. We need to be saying, we need to look at broader supply chains. So in the mining space, obviously we've got labor plans, etc., but we need to be saying what industries are actually currently happening in those environments, and how do we RPL those people, give them the knowledge, or how do we then start building them towards the standards that we require? Because by doing that, we'll create further opportunities, because the roadside mechanic is going to be more efficient, and we'll be able to start employing people. I think there's a big role for big industry to play a far more proactive role. If I look at roadside mechanics, and we spoke around the need for diesel mechanics, the big OEMs need to be saying, how do we actually talk into that? Training Force, we ran a program, an emerging handyman program, where we said, let's look at the supply chain. How do we distribute cement, in terms of the last mile? And those individuals, how do we then train them up in basic skills to be able to not just supply goods, but also then have the skills to follow through and actually be able to be home builders, etc., etc. So I concur with Anthony's view. I think we need to look beyond the traditional training space, and we need to be looking at the entire supply chain and communities that surround organizations, because I think where the economy is at the moment, for us to inject the skills that we require, companies for a while, it's going to take some time for companies to normalize and be able to employ people. So I think the model needs to radically change.
And I wanted to ask Jason, in the US, in terms of new technologies, so for example, if you look at renewable energy and those types of things, how is the USA gearing up to create skills pipelines in that, and to address those future needs?
So I think we're working on it. I mean, there's certainly community colleges that are putting in renewable energy systems. They're putting in different education pathways and stuff. I don't know how deep it's trickled down into the secondary level, or what we call our high schools here, really where students would get introduced to that. And so I think they're relying more on the mechatronics side of it. You're looking at STEM education. There's technology education that into, but I'm not going to say that I see this dramatic focus on some of these different pathways. And I think they're going to rely on different things to come together to do it. But one thing I'd like to add, and I think the opportunity here is that if we want to get big business involved, or we want to get companies and industries involved, then I think we have to look about how we're going to marry the skills and marry industry together. And when I think about World Skills Africa, I think about Skills USA, I think about just world skills in general. When you start to bring a level of competition together, and you bring industry and students together and let students really show off what they can do, I think you start to really change the narrative. And I think you really start to build a bridge between education and industry, because you can't make those events happen without industry. And industry is such a critical role of that. And I think, one of the dreams I have, and I throw it out in the US all the time, one of these days I'm going to have a skills draft. And what I mean by that is, in sports, we always have an NFL draft. We have these big events where people go play their sport. What if we did it with skills? And I mean, we've got to just think about something in a completely different way to promote what these youth are doing and what they're learning. And then what's that carrot to get industry involved? And how are we going to make that connection? And once we start doing those things, then I think the magic will really start to unfold.
Yeah, interesting. Yep. Thank you, Jason. Yeah, some valid points. And I think, to a large extent, when you look at education, there are a lot of old gray men and women driving education systems. And I think we sometimes misread the youth quite significantly, and we need to restart thinking differently. William, some of your reflections at this point?
Having listened to my colleagues, indeed, a number of issues that I would have to also share, I must really fully concur with the issues they've covered. Wherein James did make mention of the ARPL and the RPL, is what we are currently busy with at where I am now in AIDC. In terms of the community within which we are operating as well, and the skills gap, in terms of training. We did make mention of this extensively. Like I said, I really fully concur with my colleagues in there. In terms of the communities within which we are operating, this is where we need to really start. If one speaks about unemployment rates, which are very high, the question is, who are we talking to? What are we really addressing? Unless indeed, like Anthony's also referred to in terms of us being brutally honest with ourselves, unless indeed we dissect, the communities within which the industries are or education is being offered, and sector by sector, area by area, and then we start to look into what is it that this community is capable of doing and can deliver. And based on that, like we did also make mention of the the TVET sectors, be it universities or institutions of higher learning. What is it that they are offering? Is there any return on investment with these institutions within which they find themselves? One. Two, is there any return in investment of the industries within which they find? One looks into the skills that these communities possess, because one will be surprised indeed to realize how much of the plethora of skills that these people have. However, there is a mismatch in terms of employability, because one would be trained, be it a welder or whatever, but the person would not necessarily translate to being an employee, can then be left as an entrepreneur and be assisted to pursue that field, and then try to find ways by which we therefore bring on board skills gap in order to equip such an individual, and then build around that person, other, things to then be recognized in that community. Because in most cases, one thing that when we address unemployment is when people are employed, which is not necessarily the case. Is when also people are able to translate their skills into a business wherever they find themselves. The other issue that I also need to bring on board, which also is a bit disturbing, which is not necessarily being fully attended to. If one looks again into the TVET sector, which is the sector of choice that should be able to assist us. If one looks into what the industries indeed are in need of and the workforce that needs to be employed there, I'm saying this, we can check into it later in depth, but less than 40% of the workforce needed by the industry, less than 40% are people coming from the university. 60% and above, indeed, are coming from the TVET sector or the community themselves. The question one would ask would be, are the lecturers also that are offering such training in such institutions are trained or not? You just make mention, MSc, the issue of the aging. So the succession planning as well. One looks at the resignation at those institutions when people are leaving, even if they might be offering good programs for employability. But the question among others will be, do you have capable trainers to translate theory into practice? Because that's also key. Does not also help to have someone having a book in front of whoever, say 1, 2, 3 in terms of theory, but there's no translation of theory into practice. So that learning is completely out of the box, because whoever is assisting that person does not have the skill to translate that into practice. So the other issue that I also wanted to close up on is, look, we have been speaking about, currently as we speak, issues that we have been addressing and the countries have been addressing are pre-COVID-19. The question is, what is it now that one is planning post-COVID-19? Because unless also we are able to look beyond this area, whatever issues currently that we are grappling with, most of them are pre-COVID-19. Are we now positioning ourselves correctly for skills of evolution post-COVID-19 era? Again, we will be lost in a lot. So we've got to be brutally honest with ourselves, to revolutionize program offerings, to revolutionize the communities, to revolutionize ways by which we should come on board in order to align skills shortage post-COVID-19 with what is. And then, Sin, you also spoke about critical issues. And so the future is what we need to also bring them on board. So the time has come for us now to look beyond the current and say, like for instance, we should be speaking about the electric vehicles. What is in there for youth in terms of program offerings? We should be speaking about hybrid engines. What is there for youth for training? So unless these issues are being touched, it's very interesting enough that basically everyone today is be able to speak about sanitizing and masks and social distancing. But how many of the people out of 10 one can relate to hybrid engine, electric vehicle, testing stations, you name it? We've got to introduce this terminology in them by way of preparing the ground. So we should not be late. Positioning skills revolution for post-COVID-19 era. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Thank you. And James and Jason, I'm going to give you guys a quick opportunity to wrap up. We've got 5 minutes left. Anthony, your final comments in a minute or two, max?
Yeah. Thanks, Sean. I mean, I think, as I said, I think for me, the key issue is where are the jobs? You know, I mean, and this is the issue that we've got to tackle. If we're looking at the township economy, and I think that both James and William have spoken quite articulately to that. And I think that if you look at the potential of the township economy to create jobs, how do we unlock that? And I think that's about finding entrepreneurs. We need to find those township entrepreneurs. We need to find those that really have the appetite and the capability to grow, and the skills. We need to support them to do that. And as part of that, then we unlock the demand for jobs and skills in those communities. And then it means young people don't have to travel far to go and find jobs outside of the communities, spending lots of money on transport and other things for jobs that don't actually exist, knocking on doors for jobs that don't actually exist. So we got to look at these township communities, and we got to look at where's the potential, where's the entrepreneurial potential within those townships. How do we grow? How do we build on that? And how do we use that as a lever to create increased demand for skills and jobs? And I think that's where the solution lies.
Yeah, and perhaps we could add on the rural areas as well. I think
yes.
I think we could include that because there's some very highly densely populated rural areas.
Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. And then I think the last point is that if we can do that, how does our TVET system and our skills development system now respond to that? How do we make sure that we can create that alignment through appropriate programs that prepare young people for those jobs in their communities?
Thank you. James?
So I think the first thing is to focus on the schooling, to say, position artisanal trades as a career choice and not a choice of a second choice. I think looking at how do we network, again, we spoke about communities, rural areas, etc. Looking at existing entrepreneurs, and the RPL component is big. I think it's a huge opportunity that we're not focusing enough on. Micro-credentialing to get people into the system to start earning an income and start building towards a qualification. I think that's critical because, an apprenticeship program is 3 years until you start, you actually qualify. So how do we get people into the system? And I think micro-credentialing is one of those key things. And then I think we've got to be more creative around, and William mentioned it, around what's happens post-COVID. How do we leverage technology to give students or learners access to certain things where they would need a traditional workplace? So how do we introduce augmented reality? How do we bring AI into scenarios to actually start giving learners access to be able to diagnose machines or engines, etc., where they don't actually have to go into a workshop? So how do we leverage technology post-COVID-19, to give people that practical experience where they may not have current access to traditional workplaces?
Great, thank you, James. Jason, comment?
Yeah, so I not to restate what everybody said, I fully agree with what everybody's been saying. And with William, I think you were kind of going this direction, but one of the things we have to do as well is we have to recognize that skills are shifting, skills are changing. I don't need the same welder that I needed 10 years ago today. And there's different industry segments that need a different type of welder. But a lot of times when we talk about skill development, we talk about just a welder without really saying, has it changed today? Is the market shifting? Are we getting into technology? What is that technology? How is it impacting what we're doing? Because how we weld frames of cars together is completely different than how I weld in the mine when I'm hard facing buckets or shovels or different things like that. So I think not only do I accept all the challenges that you guys have put up there, but we've also got to start looking at what are the true skills today and what are those skills going to be in 5 years? Because if we don't start looking 5 years down the path, by the time we create a new curriculum, by the time we train up the new instructors, by the time we do all this work, did the industry shift again? and are we ready for that shift? And so there's just, it's like I said, it's a challenging discussion. It's a worthwhile discussion, and I appreciate being part of the panel today. Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Just a final thought from my side. I really see a lack of collaboration between training providers, both public and private, NGOs that fund training, and industry. And I really think there's a missed opportunity where we are not spending enough time talking to each other to address some of the key issues that have been raised. And we all operating in silos, which I'm finding is probably a hamstring for developing skills. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your insights. It's been wonderful. I've learned a lot today, and I'm sure it's been well received. Hope you enjoy the rest of your days, and thanks again. All the best.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks,
Well,
Sean.
That was one of the most amazing panel discussions that I had the pleasure of listening into. Critical insights that were offered on the artisans in South Africa, or rather the scarcity of skilled artisans in South Africa. And also we realized that it's not just a South African issue, but it's a global phenomenon. In particular, the contributions from one of our panelists from the US. Thank you very much to Dr. Sean Jones for facilitating that panel discussion, and of course to all the other panelists, Dr. Jason Scales, James McKenzie, Mr. William Mochale, and Dr. Anthony Ewer, Program Manager of Social Sustainability and National Business Initiative. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I think one of the key points in summary that we can derive from that conversation was we really haven't unlocked the potential of young people in this industry. And, it's a skill is something that, can be transferred. A skill is something that is tangible. It doesn't just contribute to your resume, but it's something that could build your career even beyond your resume. So we need to kind of alter our perception around how we view our qualifications in this day and age. And I loved the inputs from a lot of the panelists, some of which stated that our recruitment must change, and that reminded me that it must be difficult to hire so that it's not easy to fire. And I think those are the most important inputs that we can get from that. And, I loved how also we ensured that, artisanry and developing that skill is concomitant to the requirements of trade. And I know one of the speakers said, how do we have responsive and agile systems to ensure that, the market shifts adequately and effectively? So also it was mentioned that, look, the money is there, we have it, but there's little return. So how do we then ensure that there's a return on investment in that regard? So thank you very much to all the panelists and to also our facilitator. You held that conversation quite effectively. And so we look forward to engaging further on some of your points that you have offered. And we look forward to also making sure that there's some kind of documentum that could contribute to policies moving forward and some of the ideas that we have. Just a quick reminder, please don't forget to hashtag skills2020. And also don't forget to visit our virtual exhibition, engage with the exhibitors that are on standing by, and just to know that as you engage, prizes will be won. So we're looking forward to giving 2 participants this afternoon some giveaways. So make sure that you look into that. Don't forget to sanitize. I was not coughing because of COVID. I was coughing because of thirst. So make sure that where you are seated and where you are at, you are sanitized, you're having something to drink, and you are jotting down your notes, because we'd like to hear your feedback. We know that there were some challenges with logging ins. As we said yesterday, we're testing the capacity of our internet provider. But if you can't, or you're still battling to log into the link, please do visit YouTube. We are streaming live on YouTube as well. The next and the last panel discussion of the day is quite interesting for me. We speak about agriculture and food security. This is an industry that will never die because food is life and life is food. So we are going to be welcoming our panelists who will help us answer critical questions, particularly as we are confronted with the COVID-19 pandemic. We want to know, what are the effects of this pandemic on agricultural productivity? We also want to know that what are the important remnants and aspects of food security that we need to consider in this day and age moving forward. So we do have our panelists joining us live. I will be introducing the following speakers who will be aiding us in this discussion. And we do know that, agriculture being an important industry, we have our president of the Agricultural, or rather the African Development Bank, who speaks about a crucial investment in the agricultural sector. He goes by the name of President Akiwumi Adesina, who's from Nigeria. And he says the size of food and agriculture in Africa will rise to $1 trillion by 2030. So, that's quite a hefty stat right there. And we see that the population in Africa currently is 1.2 billion, and this will double to 2.5 billion by 2050. And this speaks to the nature of the importance of agribusiness. So we look forward to engaging further with the following panelists. So without any particular order, I wish to welcome Zamoguhle Twala, who is the founder and CEO of AgriCool. I also wish to welcome Mr. Emmanuel Okose, who's a doctoral researcher at UNISA Graduate School of Business. Also, Mr. Wynand Esbach, who's the Chief Operating Officer of Agri Colleges International. We also wish to welcome Mr. Christoph van der Riede, who's the Deputy Executive Director of Agri SA. Welcome to all our panelists. We are now about to go live as we prepare ourselves. So what we'll do is that each of our panelists or each of our speakers will give us a 3-minute opening remark on the particular topic, your thoughts, and what you think about agriculture and food security, current context, and also our future context as well. And then we will then engage from that state, and I'll be asking you questions. And of course, we are receiving questions from our viewers through our chat room on Zoom and YouTube. Awesome. Okay, fantastic. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, Tabang.
Morning, Tabang.
Morning. Thank you. So I see we only have you, Christo, and Wynand. So perhaps, Mr. Reader, you can start with your opening statements around, the organization, what the organization does, and of course, your perception or idea around agriculture and food security. And then Wynand, you can follow after that.
Good morning, and good morning to all of your viewers. It's indeed a privilege to share a few thoughts with you this morning. Agri SA is a more than 100-year-old organization, been involved in agriculture for more than a century. And we consist of 9 provinces, also approximately 25 commodity organizations, as well as more than 50 big corporates that are part of the value chain. So Agri SA's big job is to collaborate with government to ensure a conducive environment in which agriculture can flourish. Yes, our big focus is on commercial agriculture for export purposes, as well as for local consumption. Export has done very well over the past few months. We've seen export of deciduous fruit, export of table grapes to the rest of the world, very big exports of citrus recently. Our oranges and our lemons are sought after all over the world due to the high vitamin C content. And we've seen also a very good maize crop. So yes, agriculture, commercial agriculture in South Africa is in a very good space. One of our big tasks is obviously to deal with the legacies of the past. And one of the big drives for me personally is to see to what extent one can leverage the current commercial system. It's a commercial system that includes players on the import side, especially your tractors, your implementation, your technology, especially your seed technology, fertilizer technologies, etc. Then you've got your farmers that bear the biggest brunt, and they are the risk carriers in the true sense of the word. Without them, you won't have an agricultural value chain. And then obviously you've got your agro-processing companies and your retailers, your very, very highly sophisticated logistical network, and then a whole lot of other players that make sure that food that is being produced, the food that is being processed, that all of that lands on the table of our people. And that is the space in which we operate. And yes, the question is, how do we then leverage the system to bring in other players to build an inclusive and a growing agricultural sector?
Phenomenal. Thank you very much, Mr. Reed. Wynand?
Thanks, Thabang. Yeah, AgriColleges International. I'm the COO of AgriColleges International. We're a relatively young company. We like to call ourselves young, but we've been busy with our project for the last 5 years.
Right.
Just investigating the whole skills development sector and developing skills in the farming and agricultural world. And we realized very early on in our investigations through our needs analysis that it's not going to be as easy as we thought it would be. It's not just go and build a college and off we go. And because of the limitations with space and everything that goes around all that, with the bricks and mortar institutions, we went to go and look for technology that would enable us to bring a very practical, task-orientated skills development sector, such as agriculture, into an online environment. And through the use of innovative technology from across the world, we've managed to bring that technology to our students. And in 2018, we launched our first online agricultural courses. And to date, we've graduated over 800 alumni, with a whole lot more enrolled for the coming few courses. And yeah, there's a lot to be done in agriculture and skills development. And it's a privilege for us to be part of this plan and taking our country forward in a very exciting and honorable and what we like to call a cool career, where agriculture is not always seen as the go-to and the cool career. That's what we set out to do from day one, is to go and make agriculture cool again. And with technology, I think there's a real opportunity for us to bring our youth into this sector and show them that it is a very viable career. And as we've seen now during the lockdown, agriculture has been the only sector that's grown. So we're very excited about the future.
Okay, thank you very much, Wynand. Mr. Twala, welcome. Okay, you still on mute, Mr. Twala, or I think your volume is down.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, it's a bit better.
Can you hear me?
Much better, much better. Yes,
Oh,
sir.
thank you. Awesome. So thank you so much. My name is Samusa. I'm a co-founder and the current CEO at AgriCore. So basically what we're doing at AgriCore, we are making agriculture cool. I think we're doing something almost similar to what AgriCore is doing. So what we're doing, we are helping smallholder farmers with an access to market. We are providing them with an access to market. We have partnered with some reputable retailers, Boxer, Safe, and many others. And also what we have done, we have organized the informal market in Pietermaritzburg, where we enable informal traders to order so they can get the produces from the smallholder farmers, because we know one of the biggest pain points in the agri sector is that farmers, they can farm, but somehow they also better sell what they've been producing. And also On the other hand, we've created a holistic system of crowdfunding where we enable ordinary citizens to contribute or to empower smallholder farmers by lending their money to them to buy seedlings, to buy agricultural input. And when the produce grows, when we take it to the market, and from then they're going to get some return. So basically what we're trying to do is to solve the issue of lack of financial inclusivity in the agricultural sector, because even by your agribanks also perceived as a high-risk business, and also for smallholder farmers, there's not so much data around them, so that is why they struggle to access finance. So we are solving those two problems: the lack of access to market, and also the lack of access to finance through a crowdfunding model. So in a nutshell, that's what we're doing. So obviously, we are a very young company. We're turning 1 year this year in July. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, but we've grown tremendously in this space.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much, Zamokutla. I'll be coming back to you with a question. But before we do that, maybe let me go back to you, Mr. Reed, Crystal, just to then ask, with COVID-19 pandemic that is happening, what are the effects on agricultural production?
We were quite fortunate in that before the lockdown, obviously we have learned what has happened in China and all over the world.
Right.
And the implications of a lockdown on any community. So the various farming organizations, that's AFASA, NAFU, TAU,
Yes.
Agri-SA, all of us and AGBIS, we have engaged with government, with the
Right.
Minister of Agriculture. And I must really say, I was so impressed by her leadership, because she very quickly grasped that if we have a lockdown and people don't have access to food, we will have serious, serious trouble in the country.
Yeah.
And so they made a couple of mistakes right at the start. They closed down the market, and we said, but you cannot close the market because you've got literally thousands of hawkers that frequent the market, buy food,
right,
take it back to the townships. And people don't realize we've got a very sophisticated food distribution system. You've got your markets, you've got your truckers, you've got your hawkers, you've got your big retailers, and all of them play a critical role when it comes to food distribution. And that's where the opportunity lies. How do we then assist your hawkers that frequent the markets to take their business to the next level? People often forget that. People often say, yeah, but where's the entrepreneurship? The entrepreneurship is there. And these people have been operating for all of their lives, whether they've got a small fruit stall or a big stall or whatever. I can remember the village where I come from, there was always 2 or 3 uncles that would go to the market and come back with a truckload full of the freshest vegetables, and we could buy it and feed our families like that. So I think government has responded well. Obviously, one thing that we also then brought to the table was that let's have a national food aid scheme, because thousands of people have informal jobs. Thousands of people have lost their jobs. And in that space, Agri-SA has launched a national food aid campaign. So we've requested all of our farmers to come to the table and donate food to communities. And our aim was really to establish a 1 billion rand food aid drive. Just last week, we were in Limpopo, the Free State, KZN farmers are all operating in that space in the Western Cape. And the amazing thing is farmers of various backgrounds all contribute, to this. But one would have really loved government to be more involved in that space, because the last thing that you want is for people to go hungry. It is not only unconstitutional, but it's inhumane for people to go hungry. But given that background, agriculture overall, and I've alluded to it earlier, has done quite well. So on the supply side, I think given the fact that our farmers could continue producing, with the exception of 2 or 3 sectors such as the wine, tobacco sector, and the wool export sector, overall on the supply side we are well stocked. But your bigger challenge sits with the demand side. Remember, our restaurants were closed.
Yes.
There were limitations in terms of, you must be back home at 6 o'clock, or at level 5, people couldn't even leave their homes. They could only leave it for the bare essentials. So that has distorted the supply chain to a very, very large extent. But I think that has created a lot of opportunities for Mr. Twala's business and for many small-scale farmers to have a proper understanding of what those opportunities are all about, and to access those opportunities so that our country and our people remain well fed.
Sure. Thank you very much for those contributions, Mr. Christo, and quite critical to bring forth that illustration of how, demand and supply has thoroughly been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And it also then says, how do we evolve and how do we innovate, better strategies to ensure that this value chain, is either reinvented or is not further disturbed. Mr. Wynand, I think maybe if I could just go back to the online studies that your institution offers. How many, students are then absorbed in the industry through SMMEs? Like, how many of them graduate and then start their businesses? And how many of them, find employment? Does your institution aid in assisting with internship opportunities, or then helping them take their diploma, their degree, and then transitioning it into a viable business in the agricultural sector?
Yeah, what we realized very early on is that we're going to have to offer the students a little bit more than just a plain agricultural qualification, certificate, or a diploma. We did a whole lot of homework on the curriculum that's available out there, and one of the speakers yesterday, I think it was in one of the opening addresses yesterday, mentioned exactly this, where it's been 3 decades since the curriculum was last updated. We bumped into that very early on and realized that the last time that the NQF4 curriculums were really updated in agriculture was in 2003. Now, how do you teach a student technology or anything basically that was last updated in 2003, where you're working in an industry that's got technology taking over on a daily basis? You have to make it relevant to the current studies. So when we started implementing new changes into our curriculum and making it more modern and bringing our coursework up to date, the first lot of graduates that went through that course, the industry sat up and said, this is interesting. Here's a student that's now got a certificate that is actually able to identify certain things that a student that comes from a traditional curriculum course cannot do. And we're talking not only technology like drones and those sort of modern things, we're talking very basic irrigation equipment and all those things that were last updated in 2003. So the uptake of our students was very good, and it continues. Just this week again, we've been approached by a number of people saying to us, please put us in touch with some of your current students that will complete their studies in the 2020 year so that we can interview them for employment in 2021. So the industry is definitely reacting positively to it. And then we're also bringing in a lot of our coursework, we're bringing in life skills or soft skills. A lot of people refer to it as soft skills, where we're teaching students how to do from the very basics, like how to write a CV, how to conduct yourself in a business interview, how to work in a group as an individual. These are things that's not being taught anymore at school level. And to employ someone, they need to have these basic life skills. So these are things that we are teaching them as part of the curriculum, which makes a huge difference. And that also enables them to present themselves better when they go out there looking for employment. And the agribusiness side that we've brought in. It allows a lot of our students to go and start their own thing if they can't find employment. We've got so many success stories. I can keep you busy all day with students that's done a 6-week introduction course to plant production, and they've gone back to their community and they've gone and grown their own vegetables, and they've gathered a whole lot of friends around them, and they're growing vegetables, and they've expanded, and they're now supplying a supermarket in town, and they now applying for funding to buy a small piece of land. That's the success that we want. That is what's going to grow the economy of this country, making our youth look after themselves, because it's also implemented into their communities. We're working with a local school, a rural school that happens to be on our farm, so it's very convenient for us to do it. It's a government school. They've got half a hectare of land, but they have no knowledge. So we are now training one person through our college to become the leader in growing their vegetables. And through private funding that we've managed to raise, we are starting the project now of building, well, the greenhouse is built. They're going to start growing their own vegetables. That vegetable production will go back into the feeding scheme for the school, feeding 140 children twice a day. And then any excess vegetables will be sold to the community or given to the community. And any funding raised through that will start running a little business for the school. We're teaching them in beekeeping. They're going to start doing bottling of honey at the school, branding it under their own brand and starting to sell it. So they fund the school, and they're expanding their community. And that's where we need to be with our youth. We need to create those opportunities and assist them in creating their opportunities for themselves, other than just relying on employment from the corporates.
Absolutely. And I believe institutions of your nature, Mr. Barnard, must be emulated, must be populated, must be known about, because these are when we speak about practicality or converting theory into praxis, this is what we're talking about, to say, how do we then create value chains within our communities? How do we develop a local economy within our communities? Because if we don't fix that local economy, or if we don't invest in localization, then our regional economy and our national economy is still going to be challenged. So quite insightful then. I look forward to then divulging further. Just later on, I'll come back to you and ask you other questions about partnership. But in the meantime, I just want to welcome Dr. Emmanuel Okose, who's a doctoral researcher from UNISA Graduate School of Business. So welcome to you, Emmanuel. But before we get to you, let me go to Mr. Twala. I just want to find out, Zamoguhle, what are the challenges that you've encountered around access to markets as you've started AgriCool, particularly in your community and so forth? Because we know access to market is a critical phenomena when it comes to business, and we've had it as a challenge, not only regionally and so forth, but continentally as well. This is why we have your African Continental Free Trade Agreement to enable better access to markets. So what are the challenges that you have encountered around that?
Okay, cool. Thank you for the question. So I've been a farmer myself. Like, fortunately, I'm solving a problem that I've experienced at hand. So basically, what was happening is that when I was still a small-scale farmer, the problem was that you obviously, as a farmer, you aspire to supply your big guys like your Shoprite and many other retailers. But the problem that we had was that those retailers, they want you to have your food safety certificate. When you need that, like, you need a lot amount of money, and you need people to come to your farm to vet, you need to have your PEP, and many other requirements which are needed, which requires money. As a small-scale farmer, maybe operating on a very cash flow, and also don't have enough money to get those requirements. And also that's why when I was a small-scale farmer, I supported and considered to work with informal markets, because for them, as long as it looks fresh, they're able to sell.
Right.
So those are the challenges of that with access to market. Even at us at AgriCool, initially, when we started, we were just targeting the informal market. I mean, you've mentioned yourself, you spoke about the local economy. That has been our main goal, to try and make sure that you produce locally, it gets sold locally as well. So
Mm.
we just believe that, as Black people, as Black people, we are going to be able to solve our economic challenges if we take our money outside outside the community faster than we aim it. So we've had like quite a number of challenges, and fortunately, we then pivoted to the formal market with other retailers. Still now, remember, still in the formal market, we're still having some challenges. Not every product that we can still supply.
Right.
Ourselves as a company, we need to have to meet some certain standards. The pack house, you can imagine we're a startup and we're still bootstrapped and we don't even afford to have those facilities as it.
Mm. Mm.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Emmanuel, can we receive your opening remarks? And if you could tell us your doctoral research, how's that going? What is it about? And also your contributions or your thoughts around agriculture and food security.
Well, thank you very much, Tabang. Firstly, just a quick check. Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, we can.
All right. Hi, everyone. My apologies for popping in late. I was having some technical issues here in Limpopo. We're having the weather is very overcast, so I'm not sure what's happening on the technological front, with our cell phone towers and all of that.
Right.
But and it's quite uncanny because now I want to talk a little bit about the role of technology, or I would like to even incorporate the role of technology. And here we are having this kind of a challenge in this day and age where we're supposed to be shifting to 5G and its increased capabilities. But yes, getting right into it, just a correction, I'm not yet a doctor. That's still in the pipeline. It's important to make those distinctions, particularly in academia. You do not want, my professors to be wondering where I got that doctorate from,
Declaration,
from a
sure.
college or somewhere. Yeah, so it's important to make that distinction. I'm still in the pipeline. I caught a little bit the tail end of Wynette's last remarks on YouTube, just as I was struggling to get connected. And can you still hear me?
Yes, you're very clear.
All right, excellent. I'd like to just start off by saying that my former research was in franchising, and currently I'm looking at sustainability in African enterprises of different types, and trying to determine how can we speed up that transition into comprehensive sustainability, if I may call it that, because there is too often a narrow focus on the environmental aspects of it. And I think the people side really suffers a lot. Yeah. And that is one of the things which is of vital importance, particularly to an economy like South Africa's. It's quite clear that, the people side of sustainability really has to be tackled. And as I said, Wynette's tail end of what he was saying, the sustainability aspects came out in a couple of those case studies that he mentioned. And I really liked that. And I would like to see in future how we can leverage a franchise model in agriculture, because I am of the belief that franchising can be implemented across all different sectors and industries, perhaps not in the way in which we would traditionally see it, because most of the time when we think franchising, we're just thinking of our fast food outlets and our chain stores and that sort of a thing. But I mean, we have franchising in mining, we have it in manufacturing, and also I believe that we can implement it in agriculture. So a franchise-based model will allow a full integration of all actors, and we could also integrate the training aspects, because one of the things that we need to shift away from, and COVID has actually shown us this or demonstrated this, is we do not necessarily need to have people sitting in schools or educational institutions for years at a time before they start contributing to the economy by actually doing what they are being trained to do. So the training has to happen in tandem with the practical aspects of it, or with them actually operating in whatever sector or industry or whatever. So in agriculture, as Wynette demonstrated, when these young people, particularly we have our focus on the youth, because that's where really we've we've got some low-hanging fruit. You know, there's youth that are sitting out there that could be put into these type of programs that WENAD has demonstrated, and actually immediately start contributing to the economy through their own projects and so on. I've looked at some examples in my research of initiatives like what they call the Urban Agriculture Initiative, where they were putting up rooftop gardens, and also I've looked at some examples or other models as what we've seen in East Africa and Nigeria, where where we've got what is called crowd farming now, where a crowd financing model, and I'm sure Crystal will be able to speak a bit to that. A crowd financing model is being applied in the agricultural context, and that sort of caters a little bit. It's an innovative approach to the finance issue. So these are some of the things that I've been looking at and with interest. And my key question and what I would like to see us taking away from this is, what kind of plan can we put forward? I recently watched Thabo Mbeki, and he harshly criticized the National Development Plan, and he was talking about that it's not a plan per se. It's more of a, for lack of better words, theoretical document. It's a vision. So what he was saying in there is something that some of us could align with, and that is that we need concrete plans of action as to how. We've got a lot of visions, we've got a lot of theory, we've got a lot of experts, we've got a lot of knowledge that is sitting. So the issue is, how do we then action this knowledge, and how do we then bring all the key players together, similarly to what they've been doing with the Fourth Industrial Commission, the Presidential Fourth Industrial Commission. So we need to have something similar, but focused specifically on skills, and how can we then ensure that the current misalignment between skills that are existing, skills that are being trained or that are being put to people right now, that misalignment between those skills and what the current constantly changing economic landscape. So how can we ensure that the skills we're given to our young people are skills that will allow them to be able to constantly evolve in this constantly evolving economic systems that we find ourselves in. So as I said, the COVID has really brought to the fore the need for skills that are relevant and fundamental skills that allow people to constantly be learning, to constantly be reiterating their business models and so forth. So those are some of the things that I've been looking at, and I would like to see us coming up with some sort of solid plan going forward. Thank you very much, Tabang. I think I've spoken quite a bit.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. That was quite an elaborate intro and offertory to the theme. So thank you very much for that. And I think you've actually helped us to maybe build on that. Just on the issue of crowdfunding, I mean, Zamoguhle from AgriCool, you work with crowdfunding for smallholder farmers. Maybe you can take us through that model. Has it worked? How can it be improved? And then Christo, if you can also, I think from your space as Agri-SA, how can we, make sure that crowdfunding or a crowd financing model reaches greater areas and rural communities that are in need of this amount? And I think Zamoguhle had mentioned the amount of, I don't want to say red tape, but bureaucracy when it comes to applying for certification. And look, these are the standard operating procedures. These are the certificates that we need to get businesses going. But my challenge is that a lot of the people, like small scale farmers or farmers in rural communities, how do they don't think certificate. Their knowledge is, this is the soil, this is the ground, and this is how I make sure that I generate crop from this. So as Agri-SA, Mr. Christo, how are you assisting rural areas and farmers to get over or get past the bureaucratic requirements where certification is concerned? But also, after Mr. Twala has answered, maybe you can then extend on the crowd financing model, if Agri-SA has looked into that and what have been the benefits of that thereof. Mr. Twala, maybe you can kickstart us on the issue of crowdfunding for smaller holder farmers. Has it worked? How can it be improved? Over to you. Okay, we still can't hear you. Can you increase your volume? I think it's
Sorry.
yeah. Okay, cool. Much better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
great. Okay, so with crowdfunding, I mean, when you ask has it worked, you had to look at it from the two angles. From this
Yeah.
angle, with one, have you been able to raise funds from the public? And
Okay.
secondly, from the side of farmers, like have been able to have them repaying the loans and everything. So
Yeah.
fortunately, as Agricool, we've had like huge traction when it comes to raising funding. We didn't even struggle.
Yeah.
Actually, we've raised over 2 million rand from the public.
Well done. That's great.
So that has been going exceptionally well. And I know other crowdfunding as well, and they've done much better than them. And the reason behind it is that people relate to agriculture. If you're telling someone, you know what, you give me your money, I give it to a farmer, they grow food, they take it to the market, and only then you get money plus profit. So it becomes easy, something that everyone can relate to. Maybe if you talk about crowdfunding in other aspects, some people they still battle, they ask a lot of questions. But for us, the reason why we had traction was that because everyone could relate to what we do. So when it
Right.
comes to with financing farmers, it becomes very difficult now because you might struggle to get most of the farmers that we are financing are farmers from remote areas, from rural areas.
Right.
So most of them, you know, like the farming community is made up of an age group. Like you don't get a lot of youth in. Well, that's one of the problems that you're also trying to solve. If you come to them and tell them about the finance, don't understand. Like, if you give me this amount of money, how am I supposed to pay it back? And also, I mean, their businesses are not managed formally. They've not registered the company, and they don't have any bookkeeping. Like they can't even do budget. So those are the challenges we also had from the farmers as well. And again, we also had like a big challenge we had was with one of repayment because this is more of like lending. We need business lending. Especially we did the lending by doing market. Initially, when we started, we started as a financing company. We wanted to do any market linkage. But all of a sudden, now we finance these farmers, realize that no, now market becomes really great. For us to use this lending, we need to also do the market linkage also. And again, how do you de-risk? We need insurance as well because we need to insure the crops. I mean, most of the crops are not insurable according to the insurance. And again, even if they are insurable, there's not even enough data because the insurer needs to know when are they planted. They need to know a lot of things which smallholder farmers don't have.
Yeah.
And another one would be repayment. See, some of the farmers, we give them, obviously we don't give them money. You pay, buy the seedlings and have them delivered to the farm so they start doing hard work. So from there, when we start to harvest, you find that when you come to the farm, it's cabbages. When you get there, like some of the cabbages they've been harvested and sold behind your back without even us knowing. So we also had that challenge again where some of the farmers didn't pay back money because remember these people are low income earners. So as soon as they've got and they feel something that is worth like a few 100,000, they start going crazy selling because they've got a chance to have like a lot of money. So how we've been able to solve that problem was with incentivizing farmers. If you finance farmers, you can finance them in group of 5, for example. You tell them each like 10,000 rands, but you guys are liable for each other. If one default, you guys will pay the full amount. So they are liable. It's more like they look after each other to say, okay, a plant is sprayed. So it's more like you have to incentivize. It would never work without incentive. Because you can't rely that farmers they are going to do the right thing. You need to come up with strategies and incentivize them to do the right thing. Because anyway, if it's a crowdfunding, most likely it's going to be financing smallholder farmers through crowdfunding. Most likely it's going to be collateral free because they've got no collateral. That's a problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah.
And then again, it backfires that now if they
So
don't
true.
pay, anything against them.
Mr. Reed, can you extend on that? I think Zamuhle mentioned critical points there, especially around collateral, that sometimes the small scale farmers or people that are applying in the agricultural space are denied opportunities in inverted commas because of things like they don't have collateral or they don't have funding to get the paperwork done. So maybe you can just extend on some of the things that he mentioned, particularly on the issue of crowdfunding as well. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, and thank you very much, Mr. Twala, for these inputs. And I've grouped it now according to 4 categories. One is the issue of quality.
Yeah.
Right? South African consumers are very, very quality conscious.
Yes.
You are not going to get away from that. And I'll talk to that. How do we overcome that in practice? And I think that's one thing that we in the food industry, we can never sort of compromise. Quality, because South African consumers, they will give one look at a potato, and it doesn't look like a good potato, they will just walk past. The second thing is the issue of aggregation. That for me is absolutely critical. And we need to understand, how do we then, as a collective, put ourselves in the position to get access to proper funding. Then the issue of funding and the issue of collateral, and then the fourth one is water. I always say land is not the problem, water is the problem. We need to start addressing those. So in terms of quality, how did we assist farmers? Through Agri-SA and through our various commodity organizations to help them overcome the issue of quality. In the Eastern Cape, the wool growers have identified approximately 4,000 black farmers who are in the wool growing space. They made a very, very interesting discovery. They discovered that these farmers can produce wool of export quality. And if you sell your wool on the international markets, you get a lot more money than you get it here in South Africa. So the thing that they did was they introduced a RAM scheme, right? In other words, RAMs with good DNA. And government, I think Treasury via the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform, they made about 15 million rand available. These RAMs were purchased. They were introduced to the flocks of those farmers. And within a space of 10 years, they are now exporting quality wool to the rest of the world. By doing a very, very simple thing, introducing the DNA. The red meat producers are doing the same thing. I think black farmers at this point in time have in their possession approximately 50% of all cattle. That's a massive, massive market. But what is the problem? Quality of the meat, the calving rate of these animals are not very good. You spend a lot of money to grow that cow, and then you expect that cow to produce calves. And if you don't keep your eye on that cow, it will not be able to produce calves. That's how you create your wealth, right? So introducing the right, feeding mix, teaching people to ensure that that cow gets the right amount of minerals, etc., etc. And then introducing good quality bulls into that farm. And that has changed the fortunes of many, many farmers. And that's where the franchise model actually comes in, because you cannot apply a franchise model like, for example, Kentucky franchises in the agriculture industry. We must look at how do we perhaps develop a franchise model around these things that I've mentioned, the quality DNA, quality seed, etc., etc. Very interesting, Grain SA has about 10,000 black farmers that are producing barley for a big company like AB InBev. Obviously, due to the lockdown and the ban on alcohol sales, these farmers are now in trouble because they cannot sell their stuff to a big company like AB InBev. But that's the nature of farming. One year you've got a very good year, you've got a good price, and the next year everything just falls flat due to either all kinds of natural factors or biosecurity, etc. And farming is a high risk business. It's a high risk business. You need to understand, this kind of business. Then very critical, and I can go through the list. The wort growers, the fruit growers, all of them have these kind of schemes. If you look at Woolworths, you go to Woolworths for table grapes. What kind of table grapes do you see nowadays in Woolworths? Just go and see what kind of grapes. It's now grapes that no more round in shape. It's now either...
oval. I know. I can testify when I'm Mr. Christo. And they're expensive.
They're expensive. But that kind of technology, and remember when I use the term technology, I'm not talking about drones and stuff like that. I talk about seed technology. I talk about all kinds of variants and stuff like that. These things come from overseas. You know what a farmer must pay in terms of royalty just to produce that kind of grape. And then he must pay all kinds of other stuff just to produce it. But the reward is very big because Woolworths wait for open arms for them to bring that stuff. That's where the franchise opportunity sits. You know, it's more an enabling thing as opposed to a sort of stationary thing. You know, a franchise like Kentucky is stationed at a particular place. There's certain rules and regulations. And I think we need to just shift. Then, if you look at how the foreigners are doing business in South Africa, that for me is absolutely significant. You know, they've learned the art of economic organization. In other words, the Somalis, the Pakistanis, they don't do their business one by one. They aggregate, they come together, they put their money. These guys come here with nothing. But somehow they find a way. They've taken over the spaza shops in Soweto. They're running their businesses. If you see the amount of wealth that they've created, it's just astonishing because they've learned the art of economic organization. We're very good at political organization. Given our context, our history, it's understandable. But we need to shift towards economic organization. It's one thing to talk about economic freedom, but economic freedom doesn't put meat and rice and potatoes on your table. It's so economic organization. It's economic mobilization. If you look at the Jewish community, at the Afrikaner community, at the Muslim community, at the foreigners that are operating in South Africa, how they operate as a collective. You know, that aggregation, and we need to explore that. We need to find a way to address the shortcomings when it comes to finance. Then in terms of water, and I think, you know, you cannot farm without water. Even if you have this amazing type of new type of farming, you know, aquaponics, and all of this fancy stuff. You know, we need to address the issue of water. Now, there's no water shortage in South Africa. We've got a problem with water management. Right?
Yes,
municipalities. We've got a massive coastline of thousands of kilometers. The Israelis, they produce water from seawater. You know, you can take all of your cities along the coast from the grid. You can make more water available. So it's one thing to blame everyone for your circumstances. But we need to start applying our minds and come together as a unit, mobilize amongst each other. I mean, if you look, amazing story, and it's not that Black people are not economically organized. If you look at how the ladies come together in the townships, they put the money together. What is it called? The stokvel. Stokvels, my dear, generate approximately 40 billion rand in savings. But what do we do with that money? We go spend it over Christmas on the most expensive biscuits.
The clothes.
And clothes. Yeah, and you know, that's why I don't worry about hair, because that's another debate for another day. But we spend millions importing these nice hair from overseas.
You can say weaves. It's safe to say weaves.
Weaves.
Or horse's tail. Yeah.
Yes, and I've got nothing against those things, but I'm just thinking with 40 billion, we can buy farms, we can put our factories, we can put up our own shops and stuff like that. You know, we must stop playing victim. And I'm not told in terms of what colonialism and apartheid has done to our people, because I'm also Black. And I'm just saying, it's now for Black people to come together, apply their minds, and grasp the opportunities that other people are grabbing that's lying here right in front of us. I always say,
Christo,
just look around,
let's take it a notch.
Are there.
Christo, let's take it a notch further and say, not Black people coming together, but people coming together.
People, yes, of course.
Diversity and inclusion, I think, it's been undermined for the longest of time, you know, where we have different ethnicities, different cultures, different backgrounds coming together. I mean, in Germany alone, for them to build a bridge, they get 6 top think tanks in the world from different countries and different continents, and they give them a budget and they give them a time frame. And that's the importance of diversity. But Chris, I'm telling you, you've sparked so much in me. I even think we need to get you to Parliament. You know, you need to you need to go beyond Agri SA, because these are crucial thoughts. These are deep thoughts. And you're so right about. I loved the part that you spoke about, that is, we don't have an issue of water supply. We've got an issue of water management, and the whole management issue speaks to the nature of how you know, our economy is being run. We're selling so much of our goods. I mean, now water's being privatized. Who would have thought that we'd have to buy for water, or we'd have to pay for water in our own country? You know, the Woolworths grapes you're talking about, most of them are, you know, imported, and yet we've got fields and fields that can generate that. So, shoo, Christo, please prepare your closing statement there, because I'm going to ask you to finish off your points when we close off there. But thank you so much for those contributions. And when we come back to you, Christo, please can you also just re-emphasize the 4 points that you told us about? I think the first one was quality, and then I lost the other 3. But as when we come back to you, please can you tell us about that? And then just Wynand, will go to you and then go to Emmanuel. Wynand, I just want to ask you a question. How do you think, and this is as an extension to some of the critical points that Mr. Reid has mentioned, how do you think we can forge partnerships, better partnerships with global platforms, you know, those exchanges? I mean, we know that agriculture is also quite dominant in Poland, in the Netherlands. We know in Tokyo, China, the rice fields, there's just a strip of rice fields, you know, in an allocated region, particularly for that investment. In Cuba, we know that the tobacco farms, and tobacco, it starts with the plant, you know, just planting or putting the seed of that plant in the ground and harvesting it's a huge industry. How many smokers do we have? And not only in this continent, but in the world. And if you go to India, regions such as Hyderabad and Ahmedabad, where you have your spice farms as well. I mean, it's such a huge industry. So how do you think we can forge better partnerships at a global level, Wynand? And also, in your institution, do you guys facilitate exchanges with other students across countries?
I think firstly, I almost interrupted Mr. van der Rede there just to say, can we just all unmute ourselves and give him an applause?
Absolutely.
I think he's really hit the nail on its head this morning.
That's
It's time that, and we're not talking politics here, it's time that every commercial company, every corporate company, every public institution, private institution actually wake up and smell the flowers. We've got to collaborate. If we're not going to collaborate, we're all going to reinvent the wheel, and we will be in this discussion year in and year out for the next 20 years. If we collaborate, we will make contact with Mr. Twala and Emmanuel and the likes, and we will take these conversations forward. And in 2 weeks' time, I will meet with both of them, and we will say, so how are we going to franchise this? And where are the opportunities to franchise this? And unless we do that, we are not going to move forward. What has happened with technology, and we deal with technology on a daily basis now, being in the online education business, we're just a small farm in the Politsi Valley, 20 kilometers out of town in the mountains. But we've built a company here that's got alumni from 22 different countries now. We've got students in 22 countries just by doing what we're doing from our little office here in the mountains. What we can offer to our students is world experts in anything. You mentioned spices and herbs and tobacco, and name any crop. Within the next hour, I can find you the world's leading experts in any crop, and I can arrange to bring them to the students in a live webinar from anywhere in the world at any time. That's what's happened with technology. We always have this thing that we sort of quote, and that is that technology has never been as slow. No, sorry, let me start again. Technology has never been as fast as it is at this exact moment today. What's the time? 12:10. Never has technology been this fast. But technology will never again be as slow as it is at 12:10 today.
I just got a mind zoom.
And that's exactly what it is. We are working in technology. We are working with access to the world experts. We don't need to be studying curriculum from 2003 or 3 decades ago. And this is agriculture. We're talking applicable to every one of these speakers that presented yesterday and today and tomorrow. We need, all industries need to collaborate. We all need to move forward. There's just so much opportunity that the world is basically at our fingertips. And if COVID has done anything for us, it is the fact that it's opened our eyes to the opportunities. And education can never go back to what it was. And if it does go back to what it was, we've missed the biggest opportunity of our generation. We need to now move forward. We need to now realize that collaboration is the way. We need to not reinvent. We need to take our hands. We need to work with the communities. Black, white, pink, purple, doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
We need to now all move forward and make South Africa great again. I don't want to sound like Trump. I've almost got the hair. But we need to take agriculture, and we need to now take agriculture to that level where we know it can train millions of people across our lovely continent.
And Wynand, critical point there about collaboration. Diversity and inclusion doesn't eliminate the remnants of history. And I think that's what people need to understand. Collaboration doesn't mean we are excluding and we are undermining things that happened in the past where a certain group of people or Black people were disadvantaged. And I mean, if you go globally, there will always be some kind of trajectory that happened to a certain group of people. China was colonized. Who would have thought that a colonial country and continent would be the second largest economy in the world? You know, so we all have, you know, histories that challenged, you know, our human rights, that challenged a people. But we've got to use that as a building block. And I think this is what collaboration is all about.
And use it as a guideline to guide us into the future, to not go back and make those same mistakes again.
Exactly.
We need to now move forward. We need to collaborate. We need to take hands, and we need to say, yes, this is what happened in the past. We all acknowledge it. We were all part of it. We all know what happened. But we're not going to move any further if we hammer on that all the time. We need to now look forward and say, what is in it for all of us? What is it that we can all do? What can we learn from each other? And yes, we've built this platform based on something that Mr. Van der Rede said earlier. Agriculture is about managing your risks. And that's what our training is all about. It's designed on how do I manage my risks. Unfortunately, the old outdated curriculum has not kept up with the times, and that is one of our biggest risks. We need to now ensure that we manage all our risks. And how do we manage our risks? We take from the people that has achieved and the people that have learned, and we pass that knowledge on to people that are still learning, that it needs to take over in the future. And once we've transferred that knowledge from the existing, the current, the successful corporates and the successful farmers, and we bring that to our youth, whether they implement it in their own businesses or they bring it into corporate agriculture, wherever they implement it, doesn't really matter. But we need to bring and identify all those risks and show them how to avert those risks, because farming is actually all about managing your risks. If you manage your risks, you're a successful farmer.
High risk, high return industry. And I like what you said about how do we then use our errors and mistakes and use them as expertise. So it's converting errors and mistakes into expertise that could be viable to create you know, a great sector and a prosperous sector. Thank you very much, Wynand.
Sorry, I just want to add one more thing just about the water side. Sorry.
Oh, no, sorry.
Just on water management. You're not going to find a country better than managing their water better than the Netherlands. They are one of the leaders in water management. We are collaborating with them already. We are in a project with them, rolling out coursework with 6 TVET colleges starting next year. We need to, that shows you the importance of collaboration. Use the expertise out there, bring it into South Africa, bring it into Africa. Come and teach our people how to do it.
Absolutely. Wow, Wynand. Yeah, no. Crystal and Wynand, I'm just like buzzing. My mind is just going round and round, because everything that we're speaking about has got to be done at ground level. And I'm glad that it's already being done with stakeholders like you that are involved. You really are producing tangible results. I just want to quickly go to Emmanuel. if you can answer this following question, how do you think we can eliminate poverty at a practical level? Because I think that, you know, when we look at your national development plan, your, like you just said now, that former President Thabo Mbeki criticized it as a theoretical document. Aren't all our documents theoretical, you know, in some of our institutions, and at a political space as well? But I think in Africa alone, how do we be so rich, you know, yet so poor? You know what I mean? We've got resources, we've got arable land. Our grandmothers taught us to, you know, plant, you know, vegetables in our own spaces. And I mean, even the issue or notion of poverty elimination or eradication speaks to how we using, you know, the areas that we have for urbanization. We using them as smart cities. I mean, you have in Joburg, Gauteng alone, your Lanseria has so much land, and yet you have a government that is saying it's time to convert that into a smart city. Why do we need to convert it into a smart city when it's actually one of the industrial hubs of Gauteng, you know? And you have your proud Stellenbosch in Cape Town that is still retaining the essence of agriculture and development. If you go to some of your locations and townships, you see people are now paving and they're putting cement. So there's no space to plant a vegetable because we have this thing of urbanization, town planning that needs to be luxurious. And there's nothing wrong with that. But eliminating poverty has got to start with us at a ground level. What do we do with the spaces that we have? So, Emmanuel, if maybe you can answer further to say at a practical level, how do we eliminate poverty? How do we ensure food security, that people have food? Because if your stomach, remember, your stomach doesn't have eyes. So if you are hungry, you don't think about your dreams. You don't think about your vision. You don't think about what you need to achieve. You think about your daily bread. How do you ensure that you fill your stomach today and tomorrow and the next day? And that is something that I think is also denying young people of their potential to become who they need to be, because it's all about waking up and what do I need to do to provide for my family today? So that person doesn't have time to think about, oh, I want to be an artisan or I want to be an engineer. They're thinking about their daily bread. So Emmanuel, over to you. How do we eliminate poverty at a practical level?
Oh, that's a tall order to ask of me to provide the answer to a question that so many have failed to address. You know, frankly speaking, I could start by saying we need to look at how to empower people, because there was a bit of talk that we had here about a shift in mindset. You know, this dependency mindset is something that we as people need to shift away from, particularly here in Africa. As Africans, we love to complain, and some comedians have actually joked that we down here in the South, we like to complain a lot more than others. So we need to shift away from that complaining and shift into a more action-oriented mindset. Someone spoke of the Chinese example, and one of the things that they have is an action-oriented mindset and a passion or a fanaticism of some sort towards Mother China. They work for China. One particular group, ethnic group in South Africa that I've come across is that of the Venda people, and they work for Venda. They work for the land. They work for the community.
So true.
They work for the development of that area of South Africa. So these are some examples that we can then try to replicate. Now, when I'll shift back to my franchising theory, and one of the things that we learn from that is it's a great way to transfer knowledge. So it is not per se that we would be looking at implementing it in the exact, franchising cannot be implemented the exact same way in each and every instance. So our research into this space, into the franchising space, it shows us more. The more we dig deeper, we realize that, and as has been said, for many models that are taken from other contexts, there's the need to adjust or to prod and shape the model to suit the particular context in which we find ourselves in. So, for instance, bringing in the experts from different areas around the world, the Netherlands example, and there are other examples as well of great educational systems there in Netherlands and in Northern Europe as well. So bringing in those examples, we need to look at what are the things that they are doing right. And can those work here? What can we learn? How can we apply those here in Africa? And that's what we in the academic world are trying to do. But I'll borrow or I'll ride on what Waynard said as a concluding remark, that the need for collaboration is imperative. And in attempting to solve the food security question, collaboration is the only way. For years, we have acted in silos, and the Chinese and the vendor examples that I mentioned, the collaboration is clearly evident in those communities. And that is why we see the successes that we see in those communities. So we need to replicate that in other African contexts, in the rest of the South African context as well. And that collaboration, bringing together government, bringing together academia, bringing together even the youth as well. My former employer came up with an initiative called Voices Unite. And what they did at In on Africa with Voices Unite is they're trying to bring together these players that we've mentioned, the government, the private sector, the students, to say, all right, let's have a conversation and let's put all of these in a platform whereby all views are heard, and the solutions that come out of it incorporate not just, it shouldn't be just a top-down thing from academics or private sector to say, these are the skills we want to give you as young people. But the young people themselves are saying, all right, we would like to play in this space. Sort of like what we see with Zamokuhle, we would like to play in the agricultural space. So to bring in more young people, we need to have these conversations. So we need these platforms similar to Voices Unite, but we also need, and I think my biggest thing that I would suggest that we take away from this is also what Waynard was saying. Cape Media has done excellently to come up with this summit year in, year out. We do not want to get to the 20th year and we're doing this. We do not want to get to the 30th year and we're having the same conversations. In preparing for this, I looked at some of the videos of past, and we're saying similar things. So we've been having these conversations. So I would like to challenge us here, all of us who are participants in this summit of 2020, that let us take this COVID thing as, you know, a pivotal moment for us to say, no more talk, or when we meet and we haven't talked, what are the metrics that we are going to use to measure our impact? What is the impact that we would have had from now in 2020 till 2021 when this summit will hold again? What demonstrable evidence? And the thing there is, I keep bringing up the franchise model because it's a way to scale that is inorganic. It's not the organic way. It is it brings in a multiplier effect that I have no words to describe right now, but I would like to really suggest strongly that it's imperative that we look at how to bring all these people together so that we can come up with a model that will allow us to scale the case studies or the examples of what Waynard is doing, what Big Incha Farming is doing, what Zamokuhle is doing, and what these guys, what Mr. Reed and company are doing. So we bring in all this knowledge, we put it together, and we come up with a singular approach that can be applicable to different scenarios, that can work, and it takes into account the bureaucratic issues that smallholder farmers are facing. I'll give an example to surmise all these points, which is what one company is doing in East Africa, and they've expanded to Nigeria, they've expanded to Asia as well. And we came across this case study in our research of this company, I think they call One Acre Fund. And what they do, they take the equivalent of 1/4 of a hectare, which is about an acre, and they have what people would refer to as the bottom of the pyramid people in the economy. They have people who were living off the land and were even struggling to live off their little piece of land. And we're talking 1,000% improvement in yields, in income. Farmers are moving from barely surviving on their crops to actually expanding to multiple income streams by buying cows and moving into from growing just maize to having goats and sheep as well. So and there's also the element of solar and bringing in technologies. So yes, I agree with Mr. Reed that when we speak of technologies, before, in as much as we look at these fancy or what some may term sexy technologies like the drones and the likes and smart agriculture, we also need to look at that. When we say technology, we look at seed, we look at base things. So indigenous knowledge that we have here in Africa, it also plays a key part because there's a lot of knowledge that people have. We talked of the Stockwells as well. That's an interesting one. But there's a lot of indigenous knowledge in farming that is being lost, and if not captured and then replicated or shared or taught to others, we will find that we're losing out on a lot. So tapping into that indigenous knowledge is what would also tailor make these solutions and key success factors that we see in other parts of the world, is what would tailor make them to be more suited for the African context and South Africa in particular. So as I started out by saying, the people aspect of sustainability is key. So in as much as we are looking at environmental and economic prosperity, we also need to look at how do we ensure that people are fed so that they can work and they can be active contributors to the economy. And that happens when we empower people to be able to make use of whatever land that they have, whatever people are farming in small patches, even in what may be termed as concrete jungles. People are farming there. So a franchise model where we record these systems, we record this knowledge, and then we're able to transfer them in a simplified way, whereby the risks also for an entrepreneur who is just starting out, who like Zamakutle had mentioned, they would have this bureaucratic red tape that they have to go through. When they band together and when they're part of an umbrella organization, it may not necessarily be formalized as your KFC would be. It may be a cooperative of some sort, but it is at heart a franchise model. And such a model or a network model will allow those smallholder farmers to have a bigger say, to have a bigger voice when they band together, to be able to spread their risk amongst each other, so to speak. So, rounding up, we need to sit down and really go forward. And Cape Media, you guys have done an excellent job, and I would really charge you guys to let us get together and come up with a concrete plan of action beyond all these summits and so on. That's where I'll end. Thank you very much.
I will pass on the message. I hope they heard. In case they didn't hear it, I'll hammer the message with the real hammer so that they get it. So thank you very much, Emmanuel. Okay, let's have our closing remarks. Mr. Twala, we can start with you, and then followed by Christo, and then followed by, so Christo, Mr. van der Ried, and then followed by Mr. Vaynard, and then Emmanuel, you can just quickly tie up the knots for us. Mr. Twala, can we have your closing remarks? Okay, Mr. Twala, we can't hear you. You're still on mute.
Sorry about that. I didn't notice. Okay, cool. I was just saying, I think like we all the panelists have said it all. Like we need to take more action, and like they say, we can be. I mean, at AGRICO we can come up with the app, the drone, but that's innovation with collaboration.
Yes.
So we need to collaborate and work together and action, because we get to have these meetings, sit down, and at the end of the day, like Emmanuel said, end of the day, still the same thing, we repeat the same thing, we're just wasting time. I hope I'm not even doing the same now, but then we need to start actioning and do the right thing.
Okay, awesome. And I'll give Mr. Esbach a call just to check if he has called you regarding the meeting that he wants to set up. So
Cool.
I'll be checking in. I'll be that girl.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
Phenomenal. Thank you very much for your contributions, Mr. Twala. Can
you.
we have Mr. van der Rieu? Your closing remarks.
Okay. Yes, just to repeat what I've said earlier, one, quality. In everything that we do, we are part of a global world, which takes no hostage. The emphasis is if you produce the best products throughout the world, people will buy it. Whether it's in mining, whether it's in whatever sector, that's what should the focus be. And yes, it costs a lot of money, but you know what? Money is not the issue. It's the mindset. And Dr. Ivy, you were so right. If you look at what has happened in a place like Korea, South Korea, how they've changed their fortunes. They were Ghana and South Africa were far ahead of a place like South Korea. What has happened? Those are the lessons that we should take to mind. The issue of aggregation. We must stop operating like we are islands. Come together whether via a stokvel, via whatever, to put that money into one pot and manage it so well that at the end of the day you are able to translate that into long-term wealth. The third thing is funding. We know the government hasn't got any funding. Landbank is in big trouble. So how are we going to make sure that a new cohort of black farmers are enabled to start farming and contribute towards food production?
Yes.
And we will have to engage and find a way via whether it's crowdfunding, whether it's collecting our own funding to enable people to get money so that they can put the necessary things in place to start farming. And then the issue of water, need to address the issue of water. Black communities, and especially, let me stop talking about black communities. Let me rather refer to communities, all of South Africa, must start confronting municipalities and the electorate out there must start confronting government if they fail to, in terms of ensuring the water supply, basic services, etc., etc. And then the third thing is ownership. You know why countries remain poor? Because people, the land that they live on, that land remains in the hands of either a government or somebody else, whoever is the custodian. In countries where there's clear rules and regulations and where there is security of tenure, that land can be collateralized for other purposes. It can be sold so that you take that profit and invest in something else. I always say when I started off my teaching career, there was one thing that the Western Cape government at that time did. They gave us subsidies. And with that subsidy, I could buy a house. That house cost me 20,000 Rand. And I talk now about 30, 40 years ago. Right? But you know what? When my kids went to high school and to university, I had no extra money because they eat a lot. So most of the money was spent on food. But I could take my house to the bank as collateral. And with that money, I could send my kids to university. And after many years, I sold that, I bought that house for 20,000. I sold that house for 1.5 billion. Yay, it could have been very nice.
Yay, I would have gonna come to your office and knocked,
for 1.5 million Rand. And with that, I can now, create a pension fund or I can put it in another investment. So those 5 things are critical building blocks if we want to turn the fortunes around of Africans. And you look at South Africa, I mean, countries like Japan is basically on a rock. Taiwan is on the rock. South Korea is a piece of rock. South Africa is so blessed in many ways. But what do? We burn down buildings. We dug up the roads. We do all kinds of stupid things. We cannot, and we must stop being apologetic about it. There's no reason for somebody who's frustrated about service delivery to break down. Rather use the tools at your disposal. We live in a constitutional democracy. Use your vote. Use your collective power to bring about change. Not only at the personal level, but at the community level as well. We must change our mindset. We must change the way we think. And we must use the talents that God has given us to change our fortunes for the day. Thank you, Madam.
Thank you so much, Mr. van der Riet. Truly appreciate those insights. Yeah, no, I'm challenged, and I think really, Emmanuel, you're very right in saying we need to take these ideas, put them together. Cape Media needs to make a plan to get them to the president or whichever powers that be to make sure that they're implemented. So thank you for that, Mr. Esbach.
Yep, thanks. I'll be quick. I think I've said a lot. The takeaway here is, like Emmanuel said, we need to start somewhere. We need to challenge ourselves, and we need to come back here next year, and be able to show that we've actually made a difference. And not just in agriculture, in all industries. Key point: do not go and reinvent the wheel. If you don't know, ask for help. There are people that's better equipped to answer some questions in certain things. Go and ask them, work with them. Use the technology. Like I said, the technology changes by the second. And next year, this time, we won't be struggling to log in, and we won't, because there'll be new technology, and we'll all probably be doing it from wherever in the world while we're flying. Nobody knows. And then lobby for change. We need to go out there and we need to work together and lobby for change. And this is where I think we can play our part in getting some funding. Lobby for change, when I say that, I don't only mean with government, I mean with corporate world as well. The corporate world needs to be made aware that this is what we need as an industry to train our youth. And let's go to those industries and say to them, we need you to change your focus. We need you to say, we will give money to this and this and this, because that is what we want. Not just putting more money into things that's already been done. We need them to change their mindsets. And then, of course, collaborate. Let's collaborate. Biggest takeaway from every summit we've had in the coronavirus period is, let's collaborate. Let's not continue reinventing. Let's collaborate.
100%. Thank you very much, Mr. Esbach. Can we have Emmanuel, your closing remarks?
Right. I'll attempt to be quick.
You will attempt. No, Emmanuel.
I will be quick. No, I'm kidding. I will be quick. I think when I speak of action, I'll say that we can look at maybe 3 components of that. Firstly, we need to share knowledge. There's so much knowledge out there. We all have learnings, and we've done a bit of that here, and that's the central part of my challenge to Cape Media and the rest of us. We need to share knowledge. And that goes to the second aspect, which is that we need to get together. So we have these platforms, and distance is no longer an option. It never really was, but I mean, COVID has opened our eyes. Thank goodness for that. And so we need to get together and actually attempt. We need to attempt to make things happen. As an entrepreneur, I'll just say you need to start. So we may fail along the way, but in that failure, we would learn. And as Wena just said, no need to reinvent the wheel. So there are some areas or aspects where we shouldn't fail because someone else has failed there. And that's the importance of getting together and sharing the knowledge. Then we need to empower people. And that's I hope you're not losing me. Can you hear me? We need to empower people.
A bit, but we hear you.
We need to, all right. We need to empower our people because, and that means changing their mindsets. We need to share and educate them so that their mindsets can shift. And there's also should be a cultural shift, as I said, from a dependency to an action-oriented to one of pragmatism. So we need to just try, if we cannot find a solution, I mean, if we do not have a solution, we make one. We make something work, but a man has to make a plan. And that is really what has to happen. Well, even a woman, in the case of agriculture, we do see examples of that. And so we need to teach people to learn. And that is the other aspect of empowering them. We need to teach our people to learn. And that's one of the key aspects of skills development that I'd like to leave with all of us. The main thing in today's world is not so much in the specific skill that you're learning at that moment, but in the learning to learn and to constantly invent and develop oneself such that one is always able to remain relevant. irrespective of the changes in the socioeconomic landscape. Thank you very much, Thabang. Thank you very much, everybody. And yeah, we need to collaborate. Everybody, we need to collaborate. That cannot be stressed enough. So the question that I'll leave with you, Thabang, and maybe you can pose that and we can see how. The question is how? How do we collaborate? Yes.
How do we collaborate? Well,
yes, we do have an answer to that, but yes.
I think I do. So maybe you can invite me to facilitate the meeting between all four of you, you see, so we can see what we can do. I will then do a record of decision, documentum, and then I will be responsible for pushing it further to make sure that somehow, somewhere it must be implemented. I was a former speechwriter to ministers in Parliament, so I can see what I can do and which buttons I can push. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. Truly, truly insightful thoughts that you've given there, and you're very right. I think next year this time we need to come back with tangible evidence that we can say, okay, so we spoke about this last year, this is what we have. So thank you very much for your time, all of you, and I wish you all the best in the organizations that you're involved in. Let's keep moving, let's keep soaring, and definitely we will be collaborating soon. I'm going to hound Beverly to make sure that the collaborations do happen and that we meet and put all of these thoughts together into something more tangible. And let's see, we don't know in our networks how we can expand, and I'm sure there are viewers out there that are watching that would love to also be in touch with you. Thank you, thank you, thank you very much. Well then, that was Mr. Zamoguhle Twala, founder of CEO of AgriCool, Mr. Emmanuel Ekose, doctoral researcher at UNISA Graduate School of Business, Mr. Wynand Esbach, Chief Operating Officer at Agri Colleges International, and also Mr. Christo van der Riet, Deputy Executive Director at Agri SA. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Skills Development Summit 2020. I hope you have been in tune with us since 9 o'clock this morning. If you have joined us only now, then unfortunately, you have missed out on an incredible program. However, you can find the recordings on YouTube. I quickly want to announce the winners. You know that as Cape Media and as the leadership team from the Skills Development Summit, we keep our promises. And you know, our prizes are not chocolates and cool drinks and all of that. We give proper prizes, like we've got the proper shindig, you know. So well done to all of you that visited the virtual exhibition. And thank you very much for engaging with our exhibitors online. So I am here to announce the two winners that I would say engaged the most and participated the most with our exhibitors. So our first winner, who walks away with a mobile phone. I don't know the brand, so I'm not going to make any promises, but you know, a phone is a phone is a phone, hey? And because it's the Skills Development Summit, we're all about technology and we're all about quality. So chances are you're getting the phone. Our winner for the mobile phone goes to Willington Mupukuta. Willington Mupukuta, I think that Cape Media has gotten in touch with you, but if they haven't, or if we're delaying a bit, please get in touch with us. You walking away with a mobile phone. So congratulations to you. It's a virtual clap. Hope it's audible on your side. Okay, our second winner, who I must say that he participated with us from the beginning of the Skills Development Summit Day 1. He wins a laptop, and this goes to Mr. Lucas Nkosi. So congratulations to you. Yay, Lucas. Well done. Thank you. We see your posts on Facebook and on Twitter. So thank you very much for reiterating what our speakers have said. We hope that there will be more prizes. I'm assuming there'll be more prizes. Yes, there will be more prizes. We've just got that confirmation. If not, we will make the prizes happen. So yeah, stay tuned with us and till the next day, and we'll make sure that you win some prizes. There's an amazing author called Clarissa Picot, and she has written a book called Women Who Run in the Woods. And I just want to read an iteration from or rather a citation, because we had a skills development summit, so the English must be. So I want to read a citation from her book. And it says, "The doors to the world of the wild are few, but precious. If you have a deep scar, that is a door. If you have an old story, that is also a door. If you love the sky and water so much you almost cannot bear it, that is a door. If you yearn for a deeper life, a full life, a sane life, that is also a door." So this is basically to say, whatever disappointments we engage or experience in life, whatever challenges that we go through, we just need to make sure that we understand that every disappointment is a strategy to lead us into a certain direction. So we spoke about a lot of the challenges that we encounter in industry. So we just need to make sure that we have a thorough understanding of why they happen and how we can use those as building blocks to move on to the next level. And I want to close off with a quote by Neil deGrasse Tyson that says, "Be ashamed to die until you have won some victory for humanity." So everything that we do, let it be for the betterment of the earth, the betterment of our communities, and the betterment of society. It was a privilege and an honor to engage with you today on the second session of the Skills Development Summit. Please tune in tomorrow, same time, same place at 9 o'clock. We have our final closing program. It's going to be an amazing program. We'll be talking about skills development for the SMME sector. We'll be having also a panel discussion around skills scarcity in the manufacturing sector. So make sure that you engage further. We're going to have amazing speakers as well opening up the session. We're going to be joined by Dr. Nkgopotse JJ Tebane again tomorrow to facilitate one of our panels. We also will be having your Ndu Sakwe, who's the CEO of MICT CETA, and Mr. Albert van Niekerk, who's from AVN, Tech Coaching Manager Partner. So we'll be having so many experts, even from the higher education field. So do tune in. It's going to be an amazing, amazing program, and will be done by 2 o'clock sharp tomorrow. More prizes to be won, more content to be gained, more material to be engaged with. And we look forward to chatting with you further. Don't forget that the sky is not the limit. It's only the starting point. Till tomorrow, same time, same place, we're signing out.